the CSGO major tier list. And as you can see, so far, we've only got like halfway through. Some controversial decisions. I'm pretty sure people don't think Cluj-Napoca should be S tier, but I do. I think it was a great major. It was the first major that felt like an actual major, as far as I'm concerned. Great talent hires, great broadcast, loads of cool storylines. Envious win it, you know, like Prime Kenny S. And I'm pretty sure some people maybe don't think that Cologne, I think this is 2014, if I remember rightly, is a D tier event. But it was bad. It was bad because of the format. It was bad because of the games. It was bad because it had a randometer that kept bringing out Cobblestone, which was trash back then. So there's a few, but this is just my personal opinion. And a little bit it is obviously going to be biased. A little bit is obviously going to be coloured with the fact that I worked a lot of these events, and so, you know, how they're publicly perceived might not be sort of how I experience them. Indeed, a key aspect to this is sort of saying that, you know, I didn't work a lot of majors, particularly at the start. I wasn't really deemed kind of worthy to be hired working like broadcasts. I was kind of being corralled into doing like weird shit. So StarCraft 2 is fine. That was a big esport. Not particularly when I was doing it, but, you know, it was still watched, and I sort of became a part of the furniture over there. But then I ended up doing like stuff like Heroes of the Storm. I did like a Call of Duty event in the UK. I did like I hosted some weird games, and I was kind of like not really brought into the fold full-time in CSGO until a little bit later on. So I experienced a lot of these working as a journalist. Like one story I left off from Cologne 2015. Well, there was a bunch of stuff I left off from Cologne 2015. Cologne 2015 was the fucking Trash Talk event. We didn't even talk about that, right? For those who don't know, if you're new, Sam and I, Sam, who you probably don't know either if you're new, because we don't do content together anymore. But Sam and I were like, you know, we used to do like a phone-in called Trash Talk, and Trash Talk was pretty well received. It was, people used to call in and talk about esports opinions, and I'd kind of argue with them. It was a pretty good phone-in, but we'd also do like edgy skits and sketches while we were doing it. Like, you know, when Riot Light was talking about, like, it was at the height of Riot Light's toxicity, we got a dominatrix off Fiverr to record messages talking about how he had a tiny penis. And she'd be going, "Oh, do you like it when I crush your piggly wiggly dick, Riot Light?" And we'd insisted in the brief that you call him Riot Light, you know. That got turned into Richard Lewis really tracked down one of Riot Light's ex-girlfriends. That's what they used to say on the League of Legends subreddit, where reality is just warped through the fucking prism of being a League of Legends player and Redditor. Of course, it was just a dominatrix we hired for like $25, but whatever. Trash Talk was a different time. You could do stuff on Twitch. Like, we had a guy, Spam Margera, we used to call him. He used to staple shit to his forehead and make it bleed, but you could have any message stapled to his forehead. So we got him a staple, fuck Riot Games, to it. And we used to broadcast this live on fucking Twitch. And it was fine. It was fine to show that, apparently. And now I live in fear of the New York Post showing a sex doll's side boob and getting permanently banned. A different time. But anyway, one of the things we'd conceptualized for Trash Talk was we wanted to do some witchcraft, hire some witches, and do something funny with it. And so we came up with the idea of, because we were doing By the Numbers at the same time. And By the Numbers, Thorin had coined this phrase about nip magic, which was that basically Nip seemed to win these impossible series. You know, they would always find a way to come back, even with Exist doing terrible counterintuitive vetoes. And so Duncan came up with that term, Nip Magic, and Nip Magic actually went on kind of be like a lot of phrases from By the Numbers, you know, like the Rat King, like the Despicable meme, probably loads of other stuff, the whole stuff about Foxfan. A lot of it did get, because it was the only podcast and it was the most watched podcast, people adopted a lot of those terms, and this one was no different. So Nip Magic was pretty popular at the time. And so I said, well, fuck it, you know, let's do Nip Magic with actual witchcraft. And so we went on Fiverr and we hired a witch. And the premise was we wanted Freiberg, who had been playing really poorly in NIP. He was next on the chopping block, because obviously they'd replaced Fifth Lauren with Makalala and then Arlu was the sort of second successful iteration of Nip. And Freiberg was sort of next on the chopping block performance-wise. So we basically wanted the witch to astrally project herself into Freiberg's brain and convince him that he was the king of banana again, right? And obviously, we had to communicate with this witch, right? We had to fucking explain to her what we wanted, why we wanted it. And we had to say, like, there's a guy called Freiberg, and he used to be the king of banana, and obviously the witch doesn't know what we're talking about, but she doesn't really give a fuck. She just wants our money, because, you know, none of it's real. But she did. She cast a spell for Freiberg, saying, you know, you control the banana, which was fucking hilarious and all this stuff. So anyway, we ran that as an episode of Trash Talk, and then we went to Cologne 2015 and filmed a documentary which I think was called Nip, Do You Believe in Magic, which was an absolute scene. It was an absolute state. I'm at the heaviest I was pre-America because of all the drinking and partying I was doing. So there's like an interview, I think with like Freakazoid I did, where it's like, it just couldn't be. It was like twins with Arnold Schwarzenegger and Danny DeVito, and guess which one I was, right? But anyway, we were wandering around Cologne 2015, kind of like, shit-faced, drinking beer. I was in with the fans. Nip sort of were having a bit of a run, and we kind of believed for a bit, but obviously in the end it turns out astral projection either isn't real or isn't enough to lift the dead weight that is Freiberg. Again, you decide. So yeah, that was a lot of fun. That was probably the last most untethered fun I'd ever had at an event, and as a result I did miss a lot of the games, but it was a pretty rad event. The only other story I missed off from that one was when Fnatic won. I was up in the press room. They made Fnatic do a press conference, and they came through the press room. They came through a back door, through the press huddle, up into a room above it where there was more press. And they were carrying the trophy, and everybody fucking booed them. It was Fnatic, the cheating rumours and everything. Everybody was booing them, all the journalists. I was like, what the fuck is this? And we got up to the room where you got to ask questions of the players in like a press huddle. And a journalist that I was stood next to was like, I fucking hate these guys. I fucking hate them. And I'm going, why do you hate them? And he didn't say anything. He turned his phone round and it had a fucking NIP logo on it. You know what I mean? It was like so pathetic. But anyway, with that said, the next thing is Cologne, isn't it? This is Cologne 2016. Now, I got to say, this was like a weird time in my life, because I just moved out, to America. This is like the summer of 2016. So I'm settling down in America. I've started to work for E-League at this point. And so this was the major that kind of like slipped me by in a lot of ways. I don't have a lot of memories about this major. There was just so much going on in my life. I was like settling into a new country, super stressful job. This was also like a time in my life where it was very strange in terms of like how people were treating me, because this was the good part of the E-League dream. This is where it was like I was being taken to be introduced to like celebrities that wanted to learn more about esports, like, meeting like A-Rod in fucking baseball one day, because he was a bit part investor in NRG. And so Turner used to broadcast the baseball. I got told just one day, like, hey, do you want to meet A-Rod? And I'm like, oh, that's the dude in the Hall of Fame for baseball, yeah? And they went, yeah, A-Rod. Like, 'cause they don't understand that no one watches fucking baseball but them, right? So I got took into this like room, and there he is, man. And he wanted to fucking talk about NRG. What did I think of the org? What did I think of the team? Did he think it was a good investment? Should he increase that investment? What's the upside of esports? And we sat there and had like, a fucking couple-hour conversation, which was kind of surreal. And obviously, just in general, just being around the studios, this is the time you do get introduced to like tons of fucking sports stars and tons of celebrities, and it was pretty wild. It was a wild time. It was the only time probably in the entirety of esports, where I thought I was actually kind of treated with just a modicum of respect, it was very bewildering. So there wasn't really a lot of time. I mean, if I recall correctly, and this could be wrong, I do think I may have been approached to work this event. And while E-League never said I couldn't work rival people's events, I agreed with them that if I was part of the draw of E-League, right, which I'm a pretty modest dude, frankly. I mean, like, maybe not when it comes to journalism, and maybe not when it comes to, like, if you're arguing with me and what you're saying is patently stupid, then obviously I'm going to call you a moron. I don't really have any issues with that. But I never really thought of myself as, like, a big deal or a celebrity, an E-celebrity, a Z-list. I just never... That's not who I am. I'm a very fucking down-to-earth dude. And so, you know, they were telling me, like, you're fucking great, you know. You're, like, a big part of the draw. They put my face on a fucking billboard above the fucking Atlanta... They had like 2 buildings. There was one in like downtown, I think, which is where the Adult Swim offices were. And they put my face up on a fucking billboard there, and it was like E-League, and it's me, you know. And so it was like, you know, I was like, well, fuck it. If you think that, I don't. But if you think that, then yeah, okay, I'm on board, and I won't diminish what we're doing at E-League by going and working other events. And so this is why. You know, I'm pretty sure I was approached to do Cologne 2016, if memory serves me correct. But if I wasn't, I apologize. But I just, you know, I wasn't going to do it. This was past the fucking period as well where, you know, I think Thorin was back in the fold at this point. Because there was a brief period of time where I publicly said I wouldn't work ESL events. Because after the Katowice incident, they stopped hiring Thorin because, you know, Carmack was pissed off and... You know, probably a few other people over there didn't really fuck with him, you know? I mean, D-Man was an executive over there as well by this point. So I publicly said me and Thorin are a package deal, which is like some insane Faustian pact. Looking back at it, it coined the term. We got called the package, you know? And so they kept reaching out, going, oh, you know, do you want to do this event? Do you want to? I said, no, I'm not doing ESL events till you fucking... you know, recant your ridiculous assertions about Duncan. Because, you know, they'd publicly made it sound that he'd done something far worse than he'd actually done. And also sort of intimated it was all some sort of like, it was all his doing. When in reality, you know, I don't think Polish esports workers would have watched Unfiltered, frankly. It's almost like they had to be shown it specifically by somebody with an axe to grind. But whatever. So... Anyway, I didn't get to work this event. I'm not too sure how much of it I really paid attention to because obviously at E-League we were really working hard behind the scenes. Like there was hustle every day to make sure what we were going to do was the best. And so yeah, this one is always like a bit of a blind spot for me. Now there's some matches I do remember because obviously this is the one that SK Gaming win and they had that fucking... series which was pretty good with Virtus Pro where they came back from a map down, and then you did also have Team Liquid beating Fnatic in the semi-finals. This was the Dennis era Fnatic that had like they started 2016, you know, they were winning lots of events. It just didn't translate, I don't think, to the majors. Meanwhile, this was like the second run back with Simple in Liquid, I think. So there was like Liquid getting to the final of a major was kind of fucking legit, but this was SK Gaming, you know, getting a major and cementing their kind of reputation. It's one of those where it's like, this is a very fondly remembered event. It's notable for me for a few reasons, because I think this is like when Pansy came back, and I remember Pansy doing some commentary, but I can't remember who her partner was. But she was back because Moses was on the desk. And then as well, we got to work with Uber at this event. Uber from most known for Overwatch, although he started in CS. He was at this event as a host. And obviously, you know, Mitch is fucking great. So yeah, it was like, I mean, for me, while I don't really recall the event a lot, I sort of, you know, remember that the late games, the playoffs were pretty fucking good. and it was a high quality of teams and a decent broadcast. It just doesn't register in my brain because of what was going on in my life at the time. So I'm going to safely put it in A. I'm pretty sure that like everyone loves Cologne and everybody loves, SK Gaming and all that stuff. But not really a lot to say about that one beyond I was kind of off the grid and wasn't really paying attention, wasn't really active at that time. Now, obviously, the next one we've got is one I was personally involved in, and that was the E-League Major in Atlanta. Now, there's lots to fucking talk about with this one. This was like a real tough event to put together because initially, so we started the pitch where we pitched, like Valve had been very active in working with E-League right from the start. So at the first ever meeting about E-League, where I nearly talked myself out of the job, when we first had the meeting for E-League, right, what happened was there was a bunch of the Turner TV executives, including the vice president of the network. And there was all the team owners that were going to be, that owned the teams that were going to be in E-League. And there was Valve representatives there. And so there was lots of like talk about kind of the minutiae of how the league was going to operate. The first thing that happened in the meeting was the E-League execs came out and they were basically pitching to the owners what they would be able to do with all the technology we had in the TV studio, right? So one of the guys came out and said, like, think, for example, the type of stats that we could bring up on screen. We could do, like, augmented reality stuff. So when you see it through someone's, like, viewpoint, we could pull, like, reaction time and have that come up on the screen. And the example that the executive used was like, they said, it would be like the being inside the Iron Man suit is what they said. And, I didn't sort of have any issues with the idea. I mean, at least they were talking about broadcasting the tournament in first person. We'd had CGS that had literally, an executive at CGS showed Counter-Strike to his wife, and his wife said, I can't understand what's going on. Where are all the other players? And so he showed her a third-person view of it, and she said, that's much better. And that's why the CGS basically used so many third-person shots in a first-person game. So, for me, I didn't mind that there was going to be, like, new tech, new stuff. I didn't really give a fuck, right? But the owners, I don't know how Valve felt about it because Valve were typically stoic throughout the meeting, but the owners all looked at each other and were like, Jason Lake, he got up and said, like, listen, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. Like, Counter-Strike is the greatest esport ever made. It just needs to be broadcast right. All you have to do is just listen to the people that play the game, and you're making us all super fucking nervous talking about gimmicks and bullshit like the Iron Man suit. That's what Jason Lake said. And so, it got off, the initial meeting got off to a bit of like friction. There was clear differences of opinion about what the broadcast needed to be. Another issue that had come up was player treatment. And I don't know how we got onto the topic, but obviously I'd done a lot of stuff where I'd written about, orgs putting players on unconscionable contracts and salary, and the E-League executives had made it abundantly clear that they wanted to be known for treating the players right, and which was really difficult because we were entering into an agreement with the team owners. So the team owners would have the slots, not the players. But we wanted the players to be recognized as athletes and be, to a certain degree, pampered, but also have what they need and also ensure there was a behavioral standard put in place for team owners to not mistreat the players. That ultimately it was agreed upon if they did anything wrong, it contractually, behaviorally, they would essentially forfeit their position within E-League. And we monitored all of that shit very, very closely. So that came up, and I think Valve said something like, if you want to talk about organizations and player interaction, you want to talk about that with Richard. And so I was like, okay, that's fine, I guess. And I gave some like broad speech to the executives about just, if we want this league to be recognized as the best, we need to ensure that there's rigorous behavioral standards. All our treatment of the players won't alter the fact if we enable and empower our orgs to fuck them over financially and do all this other stuff. And anyway, the vice president of the network said like something about, that's great, but what how do you feel about this? And I just said, look, I'm gonna be honest, I'm here and I don't have a dog in the fight. And he said, what do you mean you don't have a dog in the fight? I thought you wanted to fucking work here. And I was like, well, I mean, not if it means I gotta get on board with anything that I don't consider ethical. They were like, they'd already that was the initial meeting before I was officially hired. So anyway, it got off to a bit of a weird start, but eventually we were able to craft the league product into something that was simplistic in the way we presented the game, but also very highly produced in terms of, the broadcast experience, and then fitted into a format that wasn't ideal, but could work for American television. Obviously, as well, we were put into the Friday night death slot. And I think, to put it into context, and I've said this before, E-League cost, I can't remember what it was. I think overall E-League was like $100,000 a show, roughly. It might have been more than that, so apologies to E-League people. So that was per episode of E-League, basically, in terms of costs. And that doesn't include building the studio and all of that stuff, the initial investment. But basically, that was so much cheaper than what an average hour of television is, or an average 2 hours of television is, that nobody basically cared. We'd managed to craft out a pretty good broadcast, a pretty good system. We had a good crew of people that, there was some caveats to that. We had to, and this sounds awful, but it's going to tie into a narrative. One of the reasons why I found James Bardolph's remarks about the Old Boys Club, and particularly implicating me in it, distasteful, was because when we did E-League, we worked with Faceit. Faceit handled our logistics. They were doing the servers, the admins, that kind of thing. And it was a joint venture through Faceit and Turner, because Turner used William Morris Endeavour, now Endeavour, that had a relationship with Faceit as well as Turner. I got the job because I was represented by William Morris Endeavour, the talent agency. I left the agency when I was officially employed by Turner because I didn't want to serve two masters. But we had to take on Faceit because they were our partners, and Faceit insisted, irrespective of what anybody else thought, and I'm not saying we wouldn't have used them anyway, but we had to have James Bardolph and DDK cast. We had to. It wasn't optional. They were on the show regardless, because of the Faceit connection. And so, as we'll get to with the London major, the idea that anybody is, put it this way, if anyone has enacted old boys politics more than anyone else in the scene, bar maybe some of the original OGs, which definitely did used to like it being a closed clubhouse, certainly he's not the guy to speak about it. And that's just being honest. And I got no problem with James. Our relationship, unfortunately, because of what happened in Stockholm, deteriorated to an irreparable point. But I still respect him. I still like him. I still remember some very good times with him. But esports eventually what turns everybody into an almost parody of like what they want to be compared to what they are, and I'm sure it's done it to me too. So anyway, we get round to planning out Atlanta, and it was interesting because Valve used to be in the studio quite a bit at the start of the E-League show, and when we were pitching for the major, we were basically telling them like, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, and when we put the pitch together, everybody wanted to do it in Atlanta. Now, it wasn't just like a logistical thing. because we had no particular tie to the Fox Theatre. And obviously we would later go on to do it with Boston. But it was kind of widely agreed upon by the executives that, you know, Turner is Atlanta, right? Like, Turner is Atlanta. Such an integral part of the development of the city that we wanted to do the first major in Atlanta as kind of a nod to that. And so, you know, the venue, the Fox Theatre, I mean, it's this beautiful, opulent theatre. Which is so much rich history for the region. I mean, to put it in context, so the Fox Theatre opened in 1929. It's right out in Peachtree Street as well, which if you know Atlanta, you know Peachtree Street's like the main street where there's all, you know, bars and restaurants and everything, and there's, you know, a lot of parties there late on a night, you know. So it is a classic auditorium. When we went to survey the venue and look at it, we were like blown away by like how nice it looked inside, and, you know, with the fold out, like, you know, the theater cinema style seating and everything else. There was a space at the back where we were going to be able to fit the desk in. We had a sweeping jib cam that we put up in the ceiling so it could come through the crowd, and just instantly we were sort of in love with this venue and this idea of this venue, and, you know, people coming. Now, it wasn't the biggest venue. I think it's like a 5,000 capacity venue, which at the time, you have to understand, there was a culture of everyone lying about their live attendance numbers. There still is, but, I mean, it was really bad at this point. You know, what people started doing in esports was they would, like, say, oh, we had 10,000 people attend. And you go, oh, 10,000 attendance or 10,000 people attending, right? Because a 10,000 attendance means there's 10,000 people in the stands at once. 10,000 people attending means 10,000 people walked through the building, right? So there was a lot of that bullshit going on in esports at the time. And so there was a little bit of there were two worries about what we were going to do. And that was like, first of all, it's about 5,000 people. Announcing it's 5,000 is pretty bad when other people are boasting about, you know, double figures and you know, doing it in a very deceptive way. And the other thing, of course, was what if we don't fill it? Right? You have to understand that the E-League studio itself, we used to give away like 200 tickets just for the little E-League seats. And we used to give away tickets, obviously. People could come in for free because we just wanted a crowd there because it looked good. But this is where I learned about something in the industry called breakage. I remember sitting down and talking to the events team, and they were explaining that on the one hand, it's good if you give a ticket away because people get it for free. Right? But on the other hand, because they get it for free, it means they don't mind cancelling because it didn't cost them anything. And so you have to give out a certain percentage more free tickets than what you would sell. And that gap is breakage, and is what they call it. And knowing what that gap is a science. You know, you the best event managers can figure it all out, right? So we were doing that on the regular, but, you know, there were some times we couldn't even get the 200. And a lot of the fans that came to the show, I used to see the same faces every week. I used to see dads coming back with their kids. I used to see, you know, hardcore fans. I used to see people that were in the scene, you know, and used to run events like admins and stuff. I used to see, you know, it wasn't clear to a lot of us, like, just, you know, how well this was going to go. I think we went to, Georgia Tech, and I think we'd done a thing where we were offering the seats super cheap or something, like on a mad student discount. But I remember to sell that venue out, I think it was a lot of hard work, actually. I remember so my office was in the TV studio area, you know, but I used to come down into the events management area where the ops used to be, and they were working hard. I mean, they were working really, really hard. So Atlanta, you know, was kind of like one of those ones where it's like, I think what we were putting on, what we were offering as an experience was fucking great, but it was still hard work to get the venue full, from what I recall. And also, I've got to say, I wasn't particularly pleased with how we did the talent selection, because like the talent selection for the broadcast it's great, right? Everyone who's there is like S-tier talent. You've got Puckett as the interviewer with Smix. You know, Smix is like one of the, again, like future Hall of Famer in esports. You've got Anderson Semler, Bardolph and DDK, Henry G and Sadikist. For the analysts, we only had Thorin and Moses. And this was like a real bone of consternation because, so the first thing we had was I fought tooth and nail to get Yanko on the desk behind the scenes. I was telling them. I had a bit of a problem. You see, when we started the show, they came to me and said, hey, Richard, you're the guy. Tell us who you want to work on the show. Tell us who you think is, you know, a good fit for E-League. And I went, yeah, sure. And they said, you know, and be candid. And so I gave them my opinion. I wrote it all down. Because everybody in CSGO is a gossipy bitch and the talent pool is a fucking nightmare for this. And they're just bag-obsessed, drama-obsessed, you know, just a bunch of drama queens. And even my friend, you know, I'm even saying this about my friends, understand? What that got translated as is Richard Lewis gave, like, dossiers to Turner, and he picked all the talent. And so, I mean, I remember, because Henry and Sado didn't do the first season at E-League, right? When they were the, you know, they were emerging talent. And I remember that lie nearly drove a wedge between me and Henry. He pulled it out of the blue one night when we were talking. Like saying, you know, like, fucking, how are you going to criticize somebody for this when, you know, you fucking pull that shit at E-League? I was like, what? I fucking didn't do any of that. I just said, like, you know, these are the guys that, you know, they're good. Don't put them in a hotel with a 24-hour bar. Not that there were any of those in Atlanta anyway. That was it, right? Anyway, I said after that argument with Henry, I went in and I said to Turner, can we please explicitly now have a rule where I have zero input on the talent? Please. I just don't want to do it anymore. It's too stressful. It's causing me relationships. We all know who's good. You guys handle it. But then when the major rolled around, obviously, it's a major, right? And we were picking, it was just the E-League crew. And I was like, we got to look a bit beyond that, I think. And so I was like, we got to get Yanko in, right? And I was showing, like, we used to, you know, pull people's reels and pull clips, and we used to package them together and send them to the executives. And they took one look at a clip of Yanko, and they were like, we can't have him on American television. Because it was being, you know, simulcast, the major. It was on TV as well as, you know, as well as just Twitch. And I was like, well, I think his accent's fine, because I'm not an American, I guess. But, you know, I, regardless of him having a thick accent for the American ear, this is the major. It's a global event. He deserves to be there. He's an elite tier analyst. So you've got to pick him. And we've only got 2 analysts. People have got to take breaks. And they wouldn't budge. I fought and fought and fought. And trust me, Thorin fought and fought and fought as well. This was the start of the end of the relationship between Thorin and E-League. He was unbelievably pissed off coming into the event because Thorin's experience with E-League wasn't stellar. So he got what they call RFE'd when he was having his visa, and that's a request for further evidence. It's now, by the way, a matter of routine that you get RFE'd if you apply for an O1 or a P1 visa, you know, which are like, you know, O1's for like the arts and entertainment and journalism, and a P1's like an athlete visa. They don't want to give them out. And so Duncan got RFE'd, and that's why Duncan wasn't on at the start of E-League, and that's why we had to use Mo. And, you know, loads of people got RFE'd. It was just Duncan's took a little bit longer. I think I got RFE'd, but Duncan's took longer for some reason. And so Duncan, by the time he turned up, he's pissed off. He missed like 3-4 weeks of fucking E-League. We were all bedded in, having a good time. Because I recommended Mo, I said, Mo will be great on the show. Get Mo. And they were going, he's never done broadcast before, Richard. This is madness. I said, this ain't madness. He's box office. Trust me. Trust me. I've known him since 2006. This guy will fucking nail it. And so when Mo came in and did a fucking great job, I was the talent whisperer. All the executives were like, holy shit, Richard gets it. Richard understands box office. Richard could, fuck me, find talent anywhere, this guy. Another reason why I was getting asked all the time, my opinion. But any of that I built up Just, they wouldn't budge on Yanko. They wouldn't budge on Yanko. And because Duncan was pissed off because it took him so long to get there, he got there. There were some issues around him getting paid at one point. I think he's talked about that publicly. And then he went and worked an event where it was impossible for him to take breaks because there was only 2 analysts. And that was only the case because they explicitly ignored his and mine requests for the 3rd analyst to be there because they didn't like the analyst's accent. Thorin was fucking fuming all that event. I mean, literally, I've seen Thorin have some fucking, like, you know, tantrums. He gets stressed out. You know how it is. Like, yeah, and I think there might have been some hotel issues as well. You know, I've seen Thorin get pissed off, like, at events before, but never like this. This was, like, really, like, give him some fucking space. It was one of those, you know, you couldn't even talk. And he was just so fucking fuming. And he said to all the executives, and he said to... You know, he said there and then, if Yanko is not at the next major or included in some capacity in the E-League, I will never work with you again. That's what he said. And that was like the vibe at the fucking major, basically. So we put together the crew. It was pretty bare bones, in my opinion. We should have gone bigger on the talent. But it was also our first major, and I think, like, a lot of people felt, you know, less working parts, less personalities to deal with. Maybe they didn't really have, like, a conception of how tiring it was going to be. So we went in and we did the major in the Fox Theatre. And I think everybody was, like, legitimately excited to see what we were going to do with the major. I think as well, we were on that new format where it was, like, the big group stage, you know, and you have the 3-0 and the 0-3. And, yeah, it was, like, a bunch of fucking, you know, really good games. Like, to put it in context, every quarterfinal was a 3-mapper. So there was always tension, there was always stakes, there was always back and forth. You had, like, an absolute, you know, like, a slobber knocker with Na'Vi and Astralis. You had, you know, FaZe getting absolutely manhandled after going a map up to the Brazilians. You had VP, and people forget that North were actually legit. You had VP and North really go at it, and Fnatic versus Gambit, and Gambit were, like, emerging as, like, a talent at that moment in time. And all of them were 2-1. I mean, like, we had a bunch of good games, but, I mean, also as well, like, even going further back, it was a pretty wild time in CS in terms of, like, Optic are in, Astralis are emerging as, like, this incredible talent, but, like, you know, you've got the Brazilians in there. This is, like, the peak. For me, when I think about CSGO, 2016 to 2018 is the peak. We're playing insane CS. The teams are fucking great. The orgs are fucking big, and they're engaged, and they want to be here. And we've got an American huge American media network treating CSGO as if it is actually a legitimate sport worthy of the same adoration and attention as baseball or football or basketball. We've got celebrity crossovers. We've got production level that's never been seen. And as I said, coming into this major, remember, this is the major where just prior to this, because at E-League, right, just in case you didn't know, at E-League, the players used to stay at this hotel, which we were all put in initially before, you know, we got housing and stuff. And it's this, like, 4 or 5, probably a 4-star hotel, but I mean a real 4-star hotel, not like a UK 4-star hotel where, you're still in a fucking, you're still in whatever they're called, them fucking ones by the side of the road, a travel lodge, right? But anyway, it's like, it was a legitimate good hotel, late night bar, nice little patio, cocktails mixed, private areas where you can go and hang out, like, decent food, nice big rooms, real nice tower. It's in a great part of Atlanta. There's restaurants all around, big park across. It's fucking great, right? And what used to happen was a limo used to come and pick up the players. A tinted glass limo used to come pick up the players and take them to events. Every player, we really pioneered the trend of the welcome basket in esports. Every player got, like, bespoke, little reminders of what they were doing, nice little personalized messages, all the healthy food. Everybody that wanted a practice room got a practice room. You want a PC in your hotel, you got it. You had everything you wanted, and we like proudly raised the bar, you know, in terms of like player treatment, because again, that was like really big from the conception. We want to treat the players like athletes, and we want to make it known we're treating the players like athletes, because that'll give it a credibility. And so anyway, we were doing all of that, and the players were loving it. I mean, seriously. The players used to come in, they were like kids, you know, in a candy store, like it's Willy Wonka's chocolate factory. And so, you know, we got calls from like ESL, and they were like saying, could you tone it down a little bit on the treatment? Because what we're noticing is players are coming from your event, your events to our events, and their expectations are a little bit unrealistic. And we were just like, no, we're going to keep doing it our way if it's all the same. So, yeah, we everybody hated E-League for treating the players well in the industry, which tells you all you need to know about it, really. But anyway, so we come into Atlanta. Everyone's, you know, super hyped, super pumped. The games are fucking great. The venue's great. We're not having a good time, but you wouldn't know that at home. And then, of course, we get the final, which is, you know, one of the great finals. We typically had like piss weak finals, but this Virtus Pro Astralis final, I know a lot of people feel Boston's the best final ever because of the comeback story, but I think just in terms of pure quality, I think this is the best final. I think this is very hard to beat. This is VP and Astralis, best of 3, 16-12 to VP, 16-14, 16-14, and the last map, Train, rest in peace. It's fucking insane. Huge ballsy call from Glaive to do that main rush to shut down VP. Just, and you know, two beloved teams that gave it their all and left it out there on the canvas. And incredibly, you know, Kiebi MVP out of fucking nowhere. This was the emergence of Astralis as the great force within Counter-Strike that would go on to win, you know, all the majors and be the greatest core of all time. Particularly once they added Magisk, who had broke out at E-League when he played for the SK Gaming that wasn't the Brazilian lineup. So yeah, I mean, it's an incredible event. What was weird, I know people don't remember this, but trust me, it's true. Everybody at the time said this event was shit. People were complaining at home, saying the crowd was dead. And I don't know what it was. I don't know if it was because, as an auditorium, it has like a super high ceiling. Like, when you're in there, the acoustics are amazing. Everybody was saying the crowd is dead, like NA crowd, lol, and all of this stuff. And when you were there, it was super fucking loud. And I don't even think, you know, it was like a full 5,000 on the last day. But everybody was criticizing this event. Everybody. They said we had a few tech issues, you know, like you always do on day one when you're moving your tech into, you know, stuff that doesn't come up in rehearsal invariably bleeds out on the broadcast. That's why I never criticize anyone for a few gremlins on day one. If you ain't got rid of them by day 3, you're trash at your job. But, you know, it was like super fucking weird because I was watching a great event. You know, and I was involved in a great event. I was working a great event. Wasn't having a great time. It was super tense and I was exhausted. But, you know, what I was getting in the theatre itself and watching the games, our opening ceremony was fucking bang on. I think that's where we had the, you know, Counter-Strike, like, CT dudes, the real CTs. It was just crazy. I was watching the feedback and people were like, yeah, this has been really disappointing. This major hasn't even been as good as the E-League TV show regularly. And it wasn't up until the final that really that negativity around the event turned around. But even then, people would never rate this as S tier. The madness is, coming off the back of this major, people were like, oh, the final really saved it. It was the attitude. And it wasn't like considered a top 3 major at all. But with the passage of time and subsequent like disappointing majors, a lot of people regard this as one of the top 3. I don't know how I feel about it as a top 3 major. I think, honestly, I said that maybe the one thing I might do here is put this as an A tier, like the highest of the A's, but not quite S. It's hard because you've got a great set of playoffs. But, you know, I know a lot of people are surprised by Cluj being in there, and I sort of think Cluj is actually a little bit better than this. I actually do. I actually think in terms of the games and the stories and the cool shit, I think actually Cluj edges this for me. So it's very hard, and obviously, you know, if I put it S, it's bias, because I worked it and sort of helped conceptualize it and worked on lots of parts of it. But, I mean, just on the basis of the final, it's a S-tier contender. But it's the highest of the A's. It's like an A+, I think. And people really were banging on this at the time. I was, like, very despondent. This isn't like Boston. Like, Boston, everyone was crying, like, tears of fucking joy. Like, dude, just relief. You know, we knew we'd done a fucking banging event. Atlanta, it was a little bit weirder. We'd had all the trouble selling out this venue. We'd had, like, negative attention each passing day of the major. We'd had people criticize the choice of venue, saying it didn't look good. Again, people were saying it looked cheap. And I'm like, this is a fucking, 100-year-old fucking theater. I don't know what you want. But overall, I mean, I think time's been very kind to Atlanta, the Atlanta Major, and the games are great. E-League were great, and sadly missed now. And so with that in mind, I'm going to pop it King of the Years. Next up, Krakow. So again, PGL hit me up out of the blue and said, hey, Rich, you want to work this event? And I said, nah, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to have a fucking holiday and spend some of my fucking six-figure salary having some Gary Good times in Atlanta because I'm not working your events. Now, they were a little bit put out by that, but whatever. I don't really give a shit. Let's talk about Krakow. This major, I mean, first and foremost, I was kind of like watching it in my fucking downtime, and I couldn't believe it because, listen, my relationship with PGL, I don't even know where it stands right now. I'll just assume it's good. But Stockholm was a nightmare to work, as I've talked about many, many times. But I love the guy who runs it. I love the guy, Silvio. He's an OG esports guy who really has, like, done so much for esports, not just in Romania, but, like, as a global happening. I think PGL, it's sad to see where they're at now because I think they are a bit sloppy in general, and I think they have a tendency to cut corners, and, they rely a lot on the idea that if you don't support them and they disappear, then you're left with ESL. And it's sort of true, but equally, why can't we have a high standard and that be true? And that's my sentiment. I'd say it all the time. The show lives forever. So, your bad mood, fuck you. If you put the bad mood on the screen, fuck you. You're being selfish. You're being indulgent. If you've got something you want to get off your chest, fuck you. You do it in the green room. You do it in the production room. You do it anywhere but on the show. The show lives forever. And so when you make technical errors and technical problems, when you don't bring your A game, that is any fan of the sport ever wanting to watch it, getting that shit experience forever. Not just live, forever. It is a recorded document of history that you have put a big shitty thumbprint on. So no, it doesn't fly with me. It doesn't fucking fly with me at all. And, I have different approaches to it. If I see somebody's down or struggling, I'll lift them up. If I think somebody needs a talking to, I'll give it to them. When you're a host, what you're doing a lot of the time is you're the point of contact between the production, the broadcast. I mean, literally on the desk. I hear them. The analysts don't. I have to steer the ship in lieu of them hearing it. But also, just in general, people perceive you as like a leader. You're the host. So you take on all these extra responsibilities. And I always took that super, super fucking seriously. And so, once I'd had a taste of working for E-League, where everybody had that desire for perfection, and really, I mean, like, look, E-League fucked some stuff up and made some mistakes, but it was nothing like real esports. It was nothing like going back, and it wasn't even a desirable idea to go back and work like a PGL or an ESL as it was then at an event, or a DreamHack, or do Face It. It wasn't even a desirable option. It was like, do I really want to have to fill for 4 fucking hours on day one again for the millionth time in my career? No, I fucking don't. Whereas in E-League, it never happened like that. So it wasn't a tantalizing prospect anyway. But so, yeah, I did get asked to work this one. I gave it a knockback and chilled out in the States. And I gotta say, PGL, one thing they definitely never skimp on, and one thing they do incredibly well, is they always hire not just the right people, not just the best people, but they hire enough people. They always make sure there's enough people, swap out roles and have breaks. And generally a PGL event is very relaxed in that sense. You're not getting the same levels of stress. Cluj obviously was technically a DreamHack event with PGL production. That's the exception to that rule. But again, I'll just read you off the talent here. You've got Red Eye as the host, goated. You've got Scoots as the interviewer. You've got Fiflaren, Moses, Natu, Sponge, and Yanko as an analyst. I believe this was Sponge's first event as an analyst. A little bit of background about this. I think after they bombed out in MLG 2016, I think it was one of the majors anyway. We were in America. And you can go look up the VODs, because this all happens. It's all recorded. But yeah, basically what happened was, Sponge was devastated and inconsolable, after the way it had gone down. Because Sponge, I know everybody loves him now, he's the fucking king of CS. He's the monster king of CS, where everyone must be in his orbit, or you're not even allowed to play the game, I think. He basically, was, so despondent after losing. We were in a bar together because I'd known him a long, long time, and he didn't want to talk to players, and he didn't want to talk to anybody, and I'm an older guy, so, we fuck him. I was telling him, bro, you just quit. Just quit and become a fucking analyst. Get on the desk. I said, you're tailor-made for this. I said, I know you want to do coaching, but fuck that even. Fuck the stress of that. Fuck having Reddit call you a dog shit IGL. Fuck Reddit mocking you because you got 16 odd. Fuck every time you express an opinion, them calling you a cretin. When you've done so much for Australian CSGO, you've gone from star player to IGL, negotiating sponsorship, setting up training regimes, developing talent. Enough's enough. If they don't love you now, they're never going to love you as a player. You've had a great career. Just go. Just quit. It's going to be fine. You will walk into a desk job. I'll see to it personally. I'll call in all the favours. So we sat and we nursed a few drinks until he felt better. We had a hug. And he goes off. And so anyway, by this point, he's been on the podcast, very early episode of the Richard Lewis Show. And I'm calling in, I'm talking to ESL executives who, they still like me even though I work for E-League and I don't work their events. And I'm saying, look, I'd consider it a favour. I'd consider it a favour if you considered Chad as an analyst, because I think he's going to be goated. I think he's literally going to be so good at it. And so obviously by now, Chad's emerging as an analyst. And I'm not taking credit for that, by the way. I'm just saying I made the introductions and tried to give him a nudge in that direction. I know he's always wanted to go back and do coaching, and he's a fucking caster now, so, whatever. I never saw casting in his future when I pulled out the old crystal ball. But I knew he'd be good on a broadcast. This was sort of the cementing of that, Sponge coming in to PGL and getting his first major as an analyst in such a short space of time is actually fucking amazing. In fact, there probably hasn't been many analysts that have gone from player to straight into a major and established themselves as S-tier talent as quickly as Chad has done, because, he's a very intelligent guy and an eloquent speaker, definitely knows what he's talking about when it comes to counterstrike, and used to be a very irreverent guy. He took no bullshit. Anyway, this is where Chad sort of emerges as the Chad as well. He was very notable on this desk. And you also have in the commentators, you've got, we're firmly into the Henry G. Sadikist era. You've got Bardolph and DDK, and you've got Anders and Semler. It's a classic broadcast lineup. Lots of analysts, lots of thoughts, lots of fun. But let's talk about the event. The event was a fucking absolute nightmare. From day one, tech problems. The delays. PGL put a statement out, right, saying regarding the connectivity issues that affected the PGL Major Krakow broadcast. And they said, hello everyone, given its impact on your viewing experience, we wanted to address the connectivity issues that interrupted streams of the PGL Major Krakow group stage matches. Since the beginning of the year, we've been working on the PGL 2017 Krakow CSGO Major Championship Series. It wasn't just about hosting a major, it was meant to be a journey we could take you on with a glorious stop in Krakow, where we would run the kind of event we've been dreaming about for years. Safe to say, the reality and the dream are quite different. We knew at the beginning of the year we would have a full summer. These past few months have been some of the busiest and most challenging in our lives, and we're disappointed we cannot give you the kind of viewing experience we think you deserve. We prided ourselves in past events for never having to take a single second of downtime during a stream. I don't know if that's true, guys. I'm going to say that almost certainly definitely isn't true. But the past 2 days have been a far cry from that. We identified the cause to be related to our venue internet service and have since taken extra precautionary measures to prevent another outage from occurring. The bright side of all of this is that we are even more motivated than ever to stage and run the main event in the Toron Arena flawlessly. Not just because the community deserves it, but because we want it. We work too hard for it. So, I mean, like, don't get me wrong, this is great. This is like back in the day when tournament organisers actually took accountability for their fuck-ups. Right? It's not like now where it's just, hey, we've just run a shit event. Here's a survey. Thanks, ESL, for the millionth survey posted by some peon in your company for feedback you will ignore because it's just data harvesting, essentially, which for some reason the subreddit allows. These are the days when Adam Appicello would be posting and saying, yeah, you know, we're going to do this, I'm going to do that. These are the days when even ESL, you know, Carmack used to post regularly, right? And used to say things, you know, now it's just, they know you'll tolerate garbage. They know you'll put up with garbage. They know you won't fucking say anything. You'd never boycott them, would you? It doesn't even matter if they're owned by the fucking Antichrist. You know what I mean? It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what happens. It doesn't matter what they do, who they're sponsored by. You'll swallow the slop and you'll like it. You'll swallow the slop, you'll swallow the meaningless games, the trash games brought to you by the US military. You know, you'll sit there and you'll watch and you'll swallow it. And if there's a delay, there's a delay. If they have to use all stand-ins for the teams, you'll watch that. They know you'll tolerate garbage. You know, that's what they do. They don't need a bad event. Is just in one ear out the other. Another one comes along next weekend. Nobody cries about it anymore, do they? Not unless, of course, you know, it's a TO that's hired Thorin, in which case, you know, if Flashpoint, when they had to implement changes super quick at the start of the pandemic, you all reveled in them failing, of course. That was good. That was actually good that league was struggling to survive. So anyway, it was a nightmare. And spoiler, when it got to the stadium, it wasn't fixed either. Tech issues just continued. And so a lot of people remember Krakow as a terrible major because the other thing that happened, and this is the thing again, this is why your production has to be on point, your hiring decisions have to be on point, your broadcast has to be on point, your shoulder content has to be on point, right? Because you can't control the games. And if the games fucking suck ass, and you get loads of upsets, and you get dog shit teams that people don't support, viewership's going to struggle, interest's going to struggle, narratives are going to struggle. In fact, the reason that this is remembered as Zeus's Major is because that's the best you could sort of dig out of the fucking pile of sand. That was the Krakow Major in terms of narrative. Like, to be clear, right, you know, we've just had, you know, the emergence of Astralis winning that major, one of the all-time, you know, great finals. And then you look at the games that we had here. I mean, it's just, like, sad, right? Like, Immortals Big is probably the best series in the quarterfinals. You need to, because it was a super back and forth game. You need to process that in 2017, right? You need to process how bad that is. The other games were, like, pretty fucking dull. Like, Astralis mixed up the Brazilians. They were fading by this point. Gambit Fnatic was close, but, like, Gambit had like, a pretty fucking wild, like, resurgence. It was predicated on pretty much, I mean, like, Zeus gets a lot of the credit, but if you actually look at how this team performed, I mean, it was the last of the summer wine from Dozier. I don't know where Adrian pulled out some of the performances he did in this major, and of course, the emergence of Hobbit as a player all sort of happened at the same time in this weird kind of, people were changing up their teams. Even Astralis were like, we got to make a change after this one. Astralis ended up, getting rid of Kirby after that. So this major is like so fucking crazy. And you look at the teams that didn't get through to the playoffs, like, so Na'Vi don't make it, right? Simple, Guardian, Seized, Flamey, Edward. That team goes 1-3, right? Like, what the fuck? It's so insane. Like, how? Like a literal fucking who's who of fucking CS. Just on one, fuck you. So, they didn't get through. The G2 esports with Shox and Kenny S didn't get through. Not only did it not get through, they lost to Gambit. You've got the beginnings of the FaZe super team. The core of it, Nico, Carrigan, Rain. FaZe Clan don't win a single game here. They lose to Big, Mouse Sports, and Flipside. It's one of the biggest embarrassments of all time. Oh, and Cloud9. Yeah, Cloud9 came in. I haven't had this push. It's Stewie 2K. It's automatic. It's Skadoodle Shroud. Nothing. Everyone's like super hype. Oh, the NA's coming back, baby. Like Optic had sort of like, been picked apart, I think, by this point. They didn't get through. But the teams that did get through, big, right? With God B, Legia, Tabson, Nex, and Kiev. They go 3-0. Right? Gambit go 3-0. North go 3-1. The MSL, AZ lineup. So, I mean, there are a lot of teams in the playoffs where it was just like, what the fuck? How's this happened? How has this happened? You've got all these tech problems. You've got a not-so-great broadcast. As I recall, I don't think it had great shoulder content. I can't remember what the Valve documentary was for Krakow. But you know how, like, we used to do player documentaries, and we used to do at least one or two for them? We'd had them in Atlanta, because I remember we did one of them. I think we might have done Neo for that one. But I can't remember, there being any for this. Or if there was only one, or, So was it Snacks and Rain at this event? Cheers, Jace. All right, there you go. I don't even recall it. You remember back when we used to actually give a shit? You remember them? Remember when we do these like great little documentaries about the life of all the great players? Remember that? Remember when we used to care? Yeah. Shame, innit? Anyway, the games are dreadful. And honestly, this is pretty much... This shouldn't be remembered as Zeus's major, right? Because the story there is Zeus quits Na'Vi, right, after, sustained underperformance and personal disagreements with players, and his attitude stinks, and he's statistically shite. So they cut him, and he goes to Gambit. And the narrative is that he molded them into the team that fucking went on to win the major. And of course, he gets a ton of credit for doing that. And I even bought into that narrative at the time. I remember by the numbers after it, we were all saying, maybe we were wrong about Zeus. Maybe he's a great IGL. Maybe Na'Vi was the problem. Maybe Edward was the problem. Blah, 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 blah. We did all of this back and forth. And then it turned out, no. Actually, when you go and talk to the players, it's like Adrian was making like a ton of fucking mid-round calls. In fact, I want to say the famous call from this final that gets attributed to Zeus, I want to say might not even be his call. So whatever. But anyway, this should be remembered as the major turning point for Brazilian CS, because Immortals were actually so legit at this point. The Henny, as people say, but Henwan and Lucas, Bolt, Steel, KNG lineup. This should have been a great team that, you know, they would set, I think they were poised to join like 100 Thieves, and then it all collapsed. Immortals not winning this major, and then all the fucked up stuff that they did after it, this just sets off a cascade that pretty much destroys Brazilian CS. It was like so fucking crazy. And it should have been a great team that like won loads more. And they probably should have won here. I mean, in the semi-final, they destroyed Virtus.pro. I mean, like, they fucking battered them. And they only went 3-2 in the groups, but they were like such a momentum team, Old Immortals, that they were like really like gathering speed. You could feel it, you know, and you could sense it palpably at the major itself, that they were getting better. I mean, thank God they ended big, but I mean that's the best game probably at this fucking whole event. So, you know, the final wasn't particularly great. There wasn't a lot of people there. There wasn't like a big pop from the fucking crowd. They were trying to like sell it, you know, with the Zeus storyline. But it was actually a pretty bad viewing experience, and actually a pretty bad major overall. Now, the only debate for me is whether this goes in C or D. Most people put it D. Is it as bad as that? Is it as bad as relative to like London and other ones that have come? I don't know, but maybe it's D. Yeah, it's a D, 100%. So there you go. Sorry, PGL. Sorry, Silvio. It's a D tier. Then it's the one. It's Boston, 2018. We'll just get it out the way, and we'll just move it up here. For me, the greatest major of all time. And I say that as someone who worked the event, sure, but I mean, this event threw up a fucking storyline that nobody could have called. I mean, I remember when we were doing by the numbers before, and Duncan and I were basically like, look, if you had to have a dark horse pick, go with Cloud9. They might be peaking at the right time. But remember, Cloud9 in the groups, well, no, in the challenge, they came from the challenger stage and they went 3-0 first. But then they battled back from 0-2, I think. They lost their first two games in the legend stage and then won 3 on the bounce to get into the playoffs. And then every game they had was like a really tough fucking tie up until the point, you know, they're like, whatever the fuck it is, like, you know, they're like 15-7 down or whatever, in, you know, in the last map in a major final to come back and win it in OT. It's insane. But we'll talk about that. We'll talk about that more in a moment, because I was there watching it happen. Let's sort of talk about, you know, E-League. We threw our pitch in. Valve really liked the Atlanta event. They really liked the fact that we were able to do those documentaries with our TV crew. Generally, Valve managed those, but they trusted Turner to do one, and they liked it so much that they were like, look, we want you to do... There was like a... I can't even remember if it was like a... There was like a history of Counter-Strike documentary. I know, because we had to play it like fucking 3 or 4 times to fill, because we had tech problems in the stadium that people forget. Yeah, it was the story of Counter-Strike, it was called. And it's like really, really good. Although maybe not good enough to watch 4 times in 2 days. But anyway. So look, let's start with just talking about the sort of stuff from, you know, the E-League perspective. Valve pretty much said they loved Atlanta and they were great to work with. We'll definitely use you again if you throw it in. And we said we think Boston's a great city for it. And I can't even remember the rationale, but it was like, I think in the pitch we were like saying, you know, Boston's got obviously, you know, Boston Celtics. You know, you think about like New England in football, and it's just a great sports city. And being adjacent to that, given that we are the fucking sports media, you know, league, we totally want to be out there and totally want to fucking, you know, plant that flag. And Boston's great, right? Like, I mean, I've been to Boston loads in my life, and Boston, I love Boston. I'm right at fucking home in Boston. It's a great city. I don't give a fuck if people are like, oh, you know, it's a bit fucking downbeat, you know, and whatever. I love it there. I'm right at home. That's like going home for me. We had a few issues What happened was, if you might not remember this, but just before we were due to go up there, because we did the challenges and Legends stage in what was now the G Fuel E-League arena. I remember that because I had to say it all the time. I've never drank G Fuel in my life. And this was, I think, at the same time, this is when G Fuel, there was that report about, like, did they have, like, high concentrations of lead or something? It was something insane. I've got to look this up. Hang on. Yeah, here it is. In April 2018, Gamma Labs settled for $118,000 lawsuit with California's Environmental Research Center over lead contamination in G Fuel products. So literally, this major is in January, and all of this is happening in the background about G Fuel, and we did the G Fuel sponsorship, and I've got to sit there and say it is the G Fuel, the E-League G Fuel arena, or the G Fuel E-League arena. I can't remember which way around it was, and I'm doing that. And if I recall rightly, Scoots was just on Twitter all the time, just wrecking everybody, going yeah, because he had an argument with the G Fuel executive on Twitter, and Scoots was just tweeting all the time about like there's lead in it, and I'm gonna be there. We're all drinking out of G Fuel beakers. Never G Fuel though, Mum's never G Fuel. Never touched G Fuel. So I guess you can call me a shill on that basis. I did say it. One of the funny things is all the skin cells, actually. I think they pull up a clip from, it might be Boston, or it might have just been the E-League in general. Yeah, it wasn't the major. But was it CS Money? Or something. I can't remember, but I think we did have like a skins training website sponsor us like one time. I like came into work, and what would happen is you would get into the meetings and you would get a document of like run a show, all the other stuff that's going on, and then I would get told like what host stuff I've got to do. And so we would get like there was like I think was it CS Money? I can't remember. But anyway, so I got told anyway we had this sponsorship. And it was the day of the show. They said, it's a last-minute sponsor. And I went, do you watch any of my content? You know that YouTube video? You know the YouTube stuff you tried to stop me doing when I first joined the company? Do you know what it's about? Do you watch it? It's because it's about skins and how they're bad and how people are scamming people. And these dudes are probably fucked up. And you're going to make me say it on air. And they went, look, just do the read as best as you can, and we'll sort it out later. So I go on air. And I'm fucking like, I'm just mumbling to the other dudes on the desk. I can't believe we're going to fucking do this. And obviously, while I'm doing that, by the way, the production can obviously hear me the whole time. It's the closest I've come to like out-and-out mutiny in the show. But I did the read. And I did what they said. And anyway, I told them after the show, I said, never make me read anything like that ever again. I won't do it. You've got one out of me. And then, funnily enough, when we were in the middle of like dealing with the fucking skin cells and all the lunatic traders that just, are all just fucking insane. One of them pulled up a clip going, Richard says he's against skins trading, but here he is taking a sponsorship deal from... Didn't get paid a fucking penny for doing it. It was sponsoring the show, dickhead. You know what I mean? But whatever. So there was that. We'd had the drama with the G Fuel. It was that was happening in the background, the G Fuel E-League arena. But also as well... the sponsor was the US Air Force. Now, I've never talked about this, but like we're gonna get it. We'll get into it. I have written multiple articles down the years about how tasteless I find military advertising in general, but specifically when it is attached to gaming products. It hit me like a bolt of lightning when I first started in esports. So let me tell you a little bit about my background. My history, my personal history. When I was a teenager, I was a bit of a fucking delinquent and a fuck up, and I got put on the streets when I was 16. My mother kicked me out the house literally on my 16th birthday, which has led to us having a very fractious relationship that we've only recently repaired. I had a tough time at school because I was a student, but with D student sensibilities. So the school didn't treat me particularly well. The college didn't treat me particularly well. And I had been told repeatedly by my teachers that I would never pass the exams required to get into university. That somehow, because of my inherent bad breeding, they knew my father was in prison. I wasn't meant to be in college, you see. They had very old, outdated attitudes. They were from, a different time. And because my father was in prison, that basically I wasn't meant to be I would fail on the big day because there would be some sort of cosmic intervention that would turn me into a failure. That's just what happens to the poors, right? And that's how I was treated at college. So I was in this like fucked up weird spot where I was living with my godmother for a time, and then eventually I managed to negotiate my way back onto an agreement to basically live in a shed like Jackie. It's why it's sort of funny seeing him having spent so much time in a shed, but basically I got to live in a shed on the like at the end of the garden. So, and occasionally be allowed in to use amenities. And, I was putting myself, I was going to college and trying to, decide what I was going to do in my life. And anyway, my best friend, Chris Madison, my best friend at the time, who was a lovely guy, and had done so much, because I used to get beaten a lot at home by my stepdad. We used to have fights, as I got older. The fights kind of leveled up, but I used to get a good shoeing. He was a working man, blue collar, super strong, leathery skin compared to like a teenage boy. So Chris would organise camping trips and stuff like that on the weekend, so just to get me out the house, So Chris he was like not a straight A student, but behaviourally was adored by his school, his college, and was very physically fit, could have been a professional footballer, but as a teenager he read the book Bravo 20 and he wanted to go into the military, and so he qualified for the Royal Marines. Now, during my last year of college, Chris and I used to train together, and it was in that time I went from being a skinny guy with long hair to being a big, strong, capable of doing fucking 10 pull-ups, which I couldn't do now, probably, or certainly, teenager, and I was trying to build up my physical, because the Marines is very demanding. I was trying to build up my physical strength and fitness to be able to meet the standards. You have to do it's 40, it doesn't sound a lot, but it's 40 press-ups in 60 seconds, it's 40 sit-ups in 60 seconds, it's like 5 pull-ups in 60 seconds, and you have to be able to run it's something like a fucking mile and a half in like 10 minutes or, whatever it is. So anyway, we used to train together a lot because I became convinced that with the family being the way it was and the school being the way it was, there wasn't going to be an option for me. I had a choice. I could either enter an elite military unit or I could end up in a factory. That was it. That was how it was going to play out for me. I didn't want that. So I didn't feel that was right. But out of those two, there was no choice, right? I wanted to join the Marines. So anyway, we trained up together, and I was getting there. I was physically very robust at this time, and Chris was insane. I mean, you have to understand, at 17, Chris had 18-inch biceps. He was a fucking monster for his age. I mean, one of the strongest dudes I have ever met in my life, and he was dead by 23. So, I mean, he was just a specimen. And he ran that marathon, I think, in Egypt. That one where you go through the fucking Sahara or whatever it is. He did that, I think, for charity, for fun. I mean, he was just wild. So anyway, Chris went into the Marines, and he got in and I didn't. I failed on lung capacity, which is important. I mean, I couldn't swim. So I had to work really hard on the swimming catch-up, but that's fine. I mean, it sounds crazy, but they can teach you to swim. What they can't teach you is fucking, they can't give you the physical capacity to hold your breath underwater for fucking 3 minutes, So anyway, I was my lung capacity wasn't good enough. I was an asthmatic child, and so I didn't get in. And they offered me the Marines recruitment building in Middlesbrough was right next to the Army recruitment building. And Chris, I was thinking, well, I'm still gonna have to go in the military. Let's see what the options are. I went next door, and they said, you can get in the Green Howards if you want with that physical, where you're at physically. And I said, well, I don't want to do that. Ideally, because my uncle was in the Green Howards, and the Green Howards, they were stationed in Ireland and dodging car bombs. So it was a tough time, and I didn't fancy that. Traveling the world on a boat, that's fucking sick. getting blown up in Belfast, or getting your legs broke by a honey trap. Less appealing. So anyway, I went and sat my exams. I got the results required to get into a university, and because I was estranged from my family, and Chris was in the Marines, I basically applied to like universities like super far away, and I got into a university through what they call clearing in the UK. And I went to a university, and anyway, while I was at that university, in my last year, Chris got killed in a friendly fire incident in Iraq. And, crucially, the Ministry of Defence covered it up. There's loads about it on the internet. You can go type in "who killed Chris Madison" and you will get a documentary about it on BBC Two. I found out by seeing his face on the front page of a newspaper in Spa one morning, and sort of just did the whole Pepe hands, like dropped to my fucking knees and was inconsolable. That's how I got it. And anyway, I mean, to be fair, I had an idea, because I used to look at the casualties on this thing called CFAX late at night on BBC Two. They used to have a rolling casualty list from the Iraq War, kind of, so you would see the names. And I saw a C. Madison, and I was like, what are the odds? And I went to get a paper just to check, and there he was. So anyway, the Ministry of Defence lied about it. They said he had been killed by an enemy insurgent that fired a rocket-propelled grenade at the boat he was on. Blew the side. It happened to be where he was sat. It blew the side of the hull apart and tore him up with shrapnel, and gave him, injuries that even if he had survived, they said his quality of life would have been awful. I think they've always tried to imply if he'd survived, he would have been, it was a brain injury. The Ministry of Defence swooped in, right, very quickly. They said, don't worry, we'll handle the funeral for you. Mrs. Madison will do all this stuff. We went, and I got frozen out. I mean, his mother didn't really like me because, again, I was a delinquent, right? And so I couldn't even be a coffin bearer at my best friend's funeral. It was all the people who served with him, many of whom were on the boat sporting injuries. One of those guys got up at the funeral with his injuries. He limped up, and he said, what happened that day when the grenade hit us? Chris didn't die at first. He was like, he got out of the boat and he got in the water. He pulled me out, and he went down fighting. And this is a complete fiction. This is a fabrication. That didn't happen. It couldn't have happened. The injuries that he sustained would not allow that to happen. So they told a fucking lie at the guy's funeral, which never sat right with me. They told a completely different version of events at the funeral, which, again, that's forever, And then, obviously, the Guardian journalists and the BBC journalists, they were able to take a piece of the wreckage, and they did tests on it, because that's back when journalists used to give a shit. And the tests proved it wasn't a rocket-propelled grenade. It was a British missile that had blown up the boat. And what had happened was he'd just got off HMS Ocean and got to Basra. There was another friendly fire incident. A special forces unit couldn't discern the identity of a non-special forces unit upriver, and they were peppering each other with fucking bullets, right? Not knowing what was going on. This is how fucked up Iraq was. Like, no one knew what the fuck was going on. Everyone was so scared of the big bad boogeyman of the elite Republican Guard, the Iraqi elite Republican Guard. The reality was that for every soldier that had a gun, there was a soldier that had a gun with no bullets. Iraq was fucked. But we told all these lies, the WMD lies. So the military was on like fucking, running around like dogs with the zoomies out there. So anyway, they were peppering each other with bullets. And then the team that was here radioed down, saying, we need backup. Chris had just arrived. He said, I'll fucking go. Let's go. He was about that shit. He was about that life. He'd served in Sierra Leone. He came home with PTSD from that. He saw a child soldier get fucking wiped out. Told me some fucking horror stories. But he was about that shit. He was about the brotherhood, right? So he fucking said, I'll go. So he gets on a boat, one of them little boats with the like on the back. It's completely not fitted for combat, they're for reconnaissance. So he jumped on one of them with the rest of the boys, and they went up. And then, because there's a fire incident up here, the people that were monitoring that thought that was more insurgents. This is so incompetent. And so they fired a missile on that boat. And that boat killed him outright. That missile, killed him outright. And then they lied about it to the family because they wanted to cover it all up, so they weren't going to be held accountable. And that's what happened to my best friend. So naturally, this left me with some thoughts about the military. This seemed to have had an impact on 21-year-old Richard Lewis of some sort. And after that, I thought back to how when you were in Middlesbrough or these shit-tatty little towns, the big van with the guy in, with the impressive uniform would roll up and they would say, "Hi, what's your name? You look like a good strapping young lad. What are your grades?" "Well, education's important in the army. A lot of people think only morons join the military, but me, I had a PhD in neurochemistry, and you should totally join. I mean, what are you going to do? What does your dad do? Work down the mines? Did he works in a factory? Does he?" "Well, you don't want to do that, do you? You want to see the world. I mean, you just do it for 4 years, get your head straight, and they just lay on this fucking bullshit until you, a working class teenager with no prospects, relent, and you will think it's a good idea to go and die to fucking further some political agenda. You're not protecting anyone when you go and invade the Middle East. You're not fighting them over there to stop them coming here. They're never coming here. So, anyway, I'm really pissed off with the fucking military and how it's advertised and how they... And so... having that experience, and then I went to a DreamHack, and at a DreamHack, the Swedish military was there, and they were bringing in kids as young as 8 or 9 to play to use the Xbox tank controller they use, and saying, "Wow, you're brilliant, you're so good, you could really join when you grow up." And it's like, they're children. And they don't have a concept of what war is. And they don't have a concept of what it's like to die or see your friends die. And you're at a gaming event and you're showing them an Xbox controller and keeping that association that it's some safe activity that you do. And I was so appalled at that. I wrote an article about it. It was called Bang Bangs for Real, because that was what my housemate's kid used to say. He used to watch... His dad was a CS player, and he used to watch his dad play Counterstrike and say, "You're so good at the game, Dad, you should go and do bang bangs for real." What he used to say, you should join the army, because again, he couldn't disassociate the two things. And after that, I was like, this is evil. The military recruitment complex is an evil industry. We might need a military, that's fine. You don't need to prey on children and teenagers to get your fucking fodder, to get your meat. It's gross. It should be banned. If a kid is told smoking is bad, they should be told getting fucking shot at by insurgents is bad. It's that simple. And that's a stance that I've always held because of all the experiences throughout my life, not least of all, losing a friend. So, what's that got to do with Boston? Well, what indeed? This was the event where we got sponsored by the US fucking Air Force, didn't we? Now, in the build-up to Boston, there were three things that emerged as problems. The first was the relationship between E-League and Thorin had irreparably broke down by this point. It's the best major of all time, and Thorin isn't there, and that's criminal for me. But there was nothing I could do. There was no card I could play. I tried. They wouldn't budge on it. They'd argued back and forth, pissed each other off, and I don't even know if they'd asked if Duncan would have worked it, but I probably think that he would have. The other thing that had happened was, in the absence of Duncan, I turned around and said, Yanko better be here. No more fucking around. No more Ivan Drago bullshit. No more putting subtitles up on Guardian's interviews. None of that. This is a global game. Fuck your American sensibilities. Let's get the best analysts available. You won't hire Thorin. You've got to hire Yanko. So we got Yanko out to an American event in Boston. And that was the other thing. And then the other thing that got brought up was it's sponsored by the US Air Force. And the US Air Force wanted to do, and did do, all of the MVPs, right now, you cannot say to an American executive, particularly in the world of sports, fuck having the military anywhere near this. You can't do it. Americans fetishize the military. They just do. It's just part of their thing, right? And I said, I'm not going to do it. And I think I did do it in the end. I think you probably find footage of me on one or two occasions saying, and now the US Air Force MVP of that game. But I argued back and forth, and they just said, the military, they're putting a lot into this. And I'm just like, yeah, but this is bad. I don't support this. And actually, I was vehemently against the Iraq war. I think Bush was a war criminal, and I think the Air Force specifically were complicit in those war crimes because they dropped the bombs that killed the civilians. And I've written articles that say this. They're out there. You don't want to put me near this. So anyway, the compromise was Golden Boy, who would come in, was going to handle the US stuff. I don't know how he felt about it, but it weren't going to be me. But I think for the main broadcast, not the stadium stuff, they had me saying the fucking, and now it was brought to you by the US Air Force. It was like that. The other problem, the US Air Force carpet bombed Serbia, and Janko is a Serbian. So, hey Janko, want to work a major? Get you in the major fold, yeah? Yeah, love to do a major, love to come to America. Yeah, well, just so you know, there is going to be a US Air Force logo on the desk while you, a Serbian man, is talking. Just saying. So look, I'm not going to get into Yugoslavia with you. I'm not, listen. No point in that. Everybody round here knows I stay out of all that shit. The Balkan shit. All of that shit. I'm not in. But I'ma just say, Serbians remember that. They remember American planes dropping bombs on their country. And it weren't that long ago. It was in my lifetime. It didn't happen in World War II. It happened in the fucking 90s. So, it was a fucking tough one. And I raised my objections and I fought the fights. But in the end, you're just going to have military adjacent to sports in America. There's no winning that one. But I want it on the record since we're talking about everything, because I know a lot of people say they did it. Richard, you said you were against the US Air Force in the article, but when it was E-League and it was your bag, you had the sponsoring. You didn't see me in a fucking uniform prancing around, did you? Anyway, I guess we can also talk about what was going on in my life before I went out to Boston in 2018. I had become increasingly disenchanted with life at E-League. Not because of E-League. The staff remained great. We were still working with the great crew. I still had people like Christina Alejandre there who were like very good friends with. I had a direct route to the vice president of the network to give feedback to, whether or not they took it on board. The door was always open. I was getting, praise and help from people in mainstream sports, including, Ernie Johnson, who's just been inducted into the Sports Broadcast Hall of Fame. Everything about being in E-League was great. Living in Atlanta was great. I love that city. I love that city, even though there was that one time I was at a gas station and someone started blasting. And that's a fucking crazy experience. But whatever. I loved everything about the city, and I loved everything about Turner. And, I really thought when I got there, I've been doing interviews. I hope this is the last job in esports I ever have. I hope we can make this a success. It's all that. But what had started wearing it down was that basically, when we were pitching for games, I had said, look, if you want to do a game with loads of interesting characters and you just go into the FGC, it's super. We have all these pop-offs, they're called, where people get up and square up in each other's faces. Loads of stories, rich history at some of the OG esports, but also it's very authentic because they reject glitz and glamour. And they were like, no, how big is it though? We don't know much about it. And I said, look, man, just look into it, meet some characters, get into it. I reckon you'll like it. So in doing that, I had paved my own way. into misery. because I had no idea what it was going to be like. And so from the very first FGC event, Richard Lewis is a Nazi. There was that campaign. On and on and on it went. They were deliberately emailing Jewish people that worked at Turner, telling them that there was a TV show called E-League hosted by a Nazi. They were telling them that. And so that was fucking wild. I had to sort of like say, look, you can see my social media output. You knew where I'd worked before when you hired me. What am I doing? Like, what's so bad? What's so objectionable about me? And remember, this was happening because when we announced our first event, and I won't name the host because they didn't even want to work it anyway, and they probably don't want to be associated with it, and they're fine, they're cool. But anyway, the community wanted another host. But it's E-League. I host everything at E-League because I am Mr. E-League. I'm employed by Turner to do that job. And it's only the host role. But they didn't like that. So what they ended up doing was, when they heard it was going to be me, and we were getting to talent hires and talent announcements for our first FGC event, which was Street Fighter, if I remember correctly, then basically they went out and they started digging into me. And what do you think they found on the internet? They are like, fucking Richard Lewis assaulted some guy at an event, because they read the lies, they read the bullshit version of it. In fact, after E-League in FGC, there's a famous call, I think from a caster called Malik Obama, who fucking basically said he's giving him the Richard Lewis right by the throat. There's a clip of that. The FGC were fucking obsessed with me. And the other thing was, every time we hired when we announced the people, Majin Obama. Sorry. Malik Obama's Obama's brother, isn't he? I was like, sorry. You can see, I don't keep up with that. Fuck the FGC. I don't keep up with any of it. Right? But anyway, the other problem was, we hired people they didn't like. They wanted some other favorites in there. And when we didn't hire those people and we kept the same broadcast crew across multiple games regardless of expertise, they hated that, and that was my fault. Then there was that stupid incident with Wolfcrone and K-Brad where people said we were racist, and Richard Lewis must have done that because he's the Nazi, remember? It wasn't racist. I mean, to this day I just don't get why you can't have a security guard in the shot because you're trying to make up some fucked up narrative about, this is people think that you need police around and stuff like this. So anyway, during this time, all of the regular things we were doing at the show, at the E-League show, would stop. And they'd stopped for some time. I used to do meet and greets. I used to like that, talking to the fan. I couldn't do it anymore. It wasn't safe. I used to get threats all the time. Funnily enough, somebody was just saying the other day, because I said, I've had credible death threats for doing this. And someone was like, no, you don't. No, that would never happen. All right, then. I also got told I couldn't risk, because I wanted to learn more about the FGC, and the head of corporate security at Turner told me, I strongly advise you don't go to FGC events because we can't put a detail on you. And if something happens and you get hurt, we strongly advise that you don't go to these things, because people were saying, I mean, because it was Atlanta, which is a big FGC town anyway, and there was an event there called Final Round. I was going to go down to that, and somebody sent a picture of a shotgun, just saying it's on site if I see you. If you go to Final Round, I'll fucking shoot you with a shotgun, basically. So, and remember, all of this is over just saying that, I think the FGC is pathetic and not being endemic to the FGC, which kind of isn't true. I used to work with, when I was in my LAN Center job, our LAN Center hosted one of the biggest fighting games tournaments events in the UK. So, pretty crazy. But anyway, there was that. Then, obviously, by the time Sonic Wolf came, Sonic Wolf tweeted something like, I'm only going to E-League so I can take that check away from that alt-right piece of shit or something, is what he said, and put that out publicly. And I'm like, okay. So it stirred up again, and it just wouldn't, it just wouldn't end. And so every time there was an FGC event, it was threats, abuse, and intimations about my politics. It got to the stage where E-League were offering me the events off. They said, "Do you just want to sit this one out?" And I said, "No, I got a job to do." So that was going on. I had a bodyguard detail for all the build-up to Boston. Then just before Boston, I did a story, a CS story, that basically exposed some guy as being shady. You know, just usual stuff. It wasn't even a particularly long one. It was just on my YouTube video. It was just a YouTube video. And that guy turns out to be like a convicted felon of gun crimes. And he started, so apparently hired a fucking private detective to find out where I live, trying to look to see if I was paying my taxes so he could maybe get the IRS on me. And then when all that failed, basically said, "I'm going to come to Boston and I will shoot you in the head." This is what he was telling people behind the scenes. "I'm going to come to Boston and shoot him in the head during the show." And so this got fed back to the corporate security at Turner. And so this is where they gave me the head of corporate security at Turner, who's like some ex-Air Force, ex-CIA badass called Chico, who is the hardest man I've ever met in my life. And basically, when we got to Boston, this is how Boston... So I'm depressed at this point. I'm miserable. I'm not having fun. I know after this, we're going to be going back to doing another FGC event. And I can't face it. And so anyway, I'm now got a CS nutcase coming to kill me. And so when we got there, I was embarrassed. I was ashamed. Like, they came into the room and told all the talent, basically, "We've had a few threats towards Richard, and, you know, just in general, as best practice, we'd like to go over, you know, some drills." So we had, like, active shooter drills and bomb scare drills on day one of rehearsal. Pretty much because some nutcase said they wanted to kill me. So that was embarrassing and sort of like shameful, because, you know, I want people to come to this event and sort of have a good time. So that's where I was at Boston. And then, just before we even got out there, I don't know if you remember this, there was a fucking super blizzard, right? We were out there early, then what they called a literal super blizzard blew in, and we didn't know if the teams that were traveling to the event were going to be able to get into Boston. It was touch and go. We had some literally come in right at the last minute because of what we had. I think there was some guys coming from Sweden, I seem to remember, and they were saying, like, "Oh, our flights to Boston are cancelled," like, so who knows what the fuck's going on. We were massively, like, fingers crossed, because if we get this fucked up act of God, what do we do? If people can't get in the country, what do we do? And so we were planning all these contingencies, like, you know, can we extend it by a day? Can we do this? Can we do that? And unfortunately, none of that shit came to pass. But we had to do it. So anyway, it was a fucking mega stressful event. I mean, mega stress. Not to mention as well, we're all carrying the Fox theatre stuff still with us. A lot of us who did Atlanta are involved again, and we're like, you know, we're not going to let them criticize us this time. Lots of people were intimating that there were problems, you know, and with Atlanta, and Boston was going to not be good. And so anyway, we had a ton of problems when we got to the Boston Stadium as well. You know, gotta say, if you go back and watch the VODs, tons of delays, tons of fill, tons of shoulder content. Day one, a little bit of day two as well. There were a ton of problems. Adverse weather event, you know how that goes. So we were fucking, like, all of us mega flustered. We get to this, and just what ends up happening in terms of the games, I think, like, just pulls us out. Because you've got Super Team Phase. You've got New Look Na'Vi, where Simple gets his man, Electronic. You've got Cloud9 have come out of nowhere to battle back and get in there, so we've got an American team. You've got the G2 with Shox and Kenny S. So we've got all of that. We've got the Brazilians are there. They played a legendary fucking game against Fnatic. That quarterfinal is sick. And we were getting, like, you know, like, really solid games, But the key thing was we were in this collision course where this narrative we'd built up the entire event was slowly unfolding. And we were getting the super team with the new orgs, FaZe. So we got the most expensively assembled team of all time, he kept saying, coming in against the home crowd of NA. It was wild. It was like so fucking good. And then you just get that final. It's back and forth whether it's this or Atlanta's the best final. I think in terms of quality, probably Atlanta. In terms of drama, probably this. This is unreal. I mean, this is Stewie arguing with Skadoodle. This is fucking, all of that. This was FaZe. They were meant to win it. They spent the money. They had the fucking dream team. Cloud9 weren't even meant to be in the top 8. And yet we ended up with this just classic back and forth game. Inferno 15-7, mega choke, one of the chokes of all time. It's got to be said, they should have won. Skadoodle pulling out his best ever performance probably in his career, because Skadoodle was fucking underwhelming. Real talk. You get the clip, you get the I'm not crying, you're crying. Probably didn't deserve the MVP, honestly, but fuck it, who cares? It was a great story. And, it kind of sucks that a match fixer won a major, but whatever. He didn't take the money, so I guess it's okay. And it was just great. The whole event was just great. There was a little bit. Tarek got the MVP for the event. Skadoodle got the E-League MVP. So Tarek got the HLTV event, but we gave Skadoodle MVP. If you remember, that was the thing that we did. A lot of people disagreed with it, but if you go look, Skadoodle, US Air Force MVP, E-League Boston Major. So, thanks for correcting me, though, guys. Always good. Fuck my memories, I guess. So anyway, he did have a great final, and we got a great interview out of it. There were a couple of things. I mean, definitely there was cheating going on in the crowd. It happened during the Brazil game. It happened definitely during some of Cloud9 games. That we were basically going around and threatening to throw people out. We were doing what you're supposed to do in Boston. We literally had a camera on the crowd that anybody in the production could access, and if we saw anybody cheating or whatever, then we would send a staff member out into the crowd and say, look, stop doing this, or we will eject you from the premises. No one does that now, of course. But we were doing it because, we used to make a big deal, having having a regular opening to the show where we were telling the fans, like, look, it's good that you're excited, but don't give away information or we'll have to ask you to leave. And we used to do that every week. So it was, again, paramount to the experience. We wanted to preserve competitive integrity as much as we could. Anyway, so you get the final, you get it off, boom, it's all good. I'm fucking done. I'm like so frazzled by the end of this event. I just melt. I'm just like, I'm just so ready. I didn't go out and I went out with a couple of friends and just like went. I remember I talked to Carrigan on the night. Me and Carrigan got a beer, and this is where I managed to find like a quiet bar. We went out and we got a few drinks. I was there with a couple of friends who I will not name. But because they are esports adjacent, but Carrigan came to the quiet bar. He was having a pretty rough time. A lot of people, were obviously like expecting them to win, and when it went down, there was like high emotions. I remember being in a bar, and it was all like the NA people. So I went to the crowded bar where the after party was, and the NA people, Scoots had come along, and Moses was obviously there because he worked the show. There were a ton of like CLG Red were there. There was like loads of just NA personalities there, like NACS personalities. Everyone was fucking crying. Like everyone was crying. Scoots was crying, like everyone was crying because nobody thought NA would ever do anything in CS. They thought those days were done. The idea that North America could get a major was like, it hit a lot of people like really in the fucking feels, and it was like a general like feel good atmosphere, but it just wasn't feel good for me because the event had been like a fucking nightmare. So I like quietly sidled away and bumped into Carrigan in this bar. And anyway, I said, me and Carrigan were like talking over a beer, and I said, man, that's a fucking nightmare, that one. Like, and he just said, one thing I've learned in playing this game for so long is just sometimes you don't win. It's not your day to win. And he said that was it today. He said the things they were doing, what the fuck? They were just on one. They just won. And he was very nonchalant about it. He didn't seem mega upset. A lot of FaZe took it a lot harder. Particularly Guardian, because Guardian obviously now is like the guy who never got a major. Which is fucking sad, unbelievably sad, and unbelievably undeserved, if deserve has anything to do with it. So anyway, yeah, that was like interesting. And then, I just like kind of sidled away. I went back to the hotel and was just waiting to get back to Atlanta. And then after that, I pretty much knew in this moment that this was it for me. Like, I didn't want to go back. I didn't want to have an incredible high like this and then go back to doing an FGC event and having to hide in the broom closet because some nutcase is saying they're going to stab me or kill me or shoot me or whatever it was. I just didn't want to live like that again. So I went back to Atlanta after this event knowing that I'd pretty much finished, with E-League. I remember having talks where I said, guys, my contract negotiations were coming up, and I've told people about how, like, Shaq came in to give me a pep talk, and he was like, make sure you get your paper, because you're the best thing about the show, man. Always get paid. Always know your value. And then he did a fist bump, which broke my hand. And I was like, yeah, that's great. Thanks, Shaq. I will do that. But I knew I wasn't going to stay. And so I remember I just told him I couldn't handle the stress anymore. I said, honestly, E-League used to be like one of the best things in my life. I used to love working here. Now, through no fault of your own, it's become a problem. It's making me miserable. And I'm probably not going to sign on again. They were going to give me there was like a fucking pay rise, I would have been making, I don't know, $150,000 a year, $150,000 a year, which is pretty good. And, 401k and free healthcare and all that stuff. It was all there. It was another 2-year deal. But I couldn't sign. I was just too fucking miserable with the job. So I knew I wasn't going to sign. And so not long after that, obviously got partying with someone in Vegas. And it turned out they were setting up an esports venture in Vegas. And they said, do you want to come to Vegas? We'll double your money. And I went, do you know what I'm on? And I went, doesn't matter, we'll double it. And I went, and keep in mind, I was leaving anyway. And I said, I'm on this. And they said, right, we'll give you double that. So they just doubled the money to hire me. So I said, you know what? Fuck it. I'm out. And that was how the Vegas adventure started. But yeah, it's like really sad. Because, I remember, like, backstage, like, everyone's having a blub, everyone's crying, and it was just tears of joy. Like, people were just so happy it had gone so well because it had been so hard. It had been such a challenge. Even just getting the stuff into Boston, getting the crew up to Boston, getting the teams into Boston. I couldn't enjoy any of it. And I think we did a great show. I think, honestly, that desk, even in the absence of Duncan, I think it's straight fire. I think Jason's on his A game. I think Golden Boy is always a great addition to a show, doing all the stage work, the legendary voice crack. It's a great show. It's the best major of all time. Unfortunately, I just, I didn't really get to enjoy it because of all the bullshit, which, certainly has made me bitter because you can't go back and get these memories back. You can't go back and not be in a bad mood with people you care about when they're not here anymore. And so, all because of this negativity that was swirling around, because I just wanted to talk about video games for a living. But I think, real talk, going out on a high, best major of all time. Next, we've got London, and talk about contrasts. Now, London was weird. Behind the scenes, and again, this is why, betrayal is often a bitter pill to swallow. That behind the scenes, when we'd heard Face It had got it, and it was going to be in London, I was like, oh, that's pretty fucking sick. And I was still pally with a lot of the Face It guys at this point. And I was like, might be something that I get to do something at, maybe. I don't know. Who knows? I can't even remember what conversations we ended up having, but I want to say probably not any. What ended up happening here was there was like some insane fuckery. This was like the height of the well, maybe not the height, but it was like a continuance of the ESL Face It wars. ESL was getting bigger and bigger. Face It, by this point, you know, they had their own Twitch-sponsored league, and they were trying to do everything they could to fucking not, you know, lose the battle of CS to ESL, and this major was absolutely meant to be, you know, their way of proving it. But what ended up happening was they, for some reason that I will never understand, they decided that they just didn't want to bring in people that were associated with other broadcasts. They really didn't want to do it. And so because Sponge had now cemented himself over at ESL, he was doing Pro League and all that stuff. I remember hearing behind the scenes that they were just not going to hire Sponge. And by 2018, Sponge is the S-tier analyst. It's like, you want him, you want Yanko. And then we also heard that Yanko wasn't going to be there. And we were like, what? And so it was like super weird. Like, Face It had their own guys, right? Obviously, James and DDK are, it was incubator talent. It's a really good idea, actually, by the way. Definitely, tournament operators should be doing this. Develop your own broadcast talent and then promote them. You know, think Blast, Scrawny, and Launders. It makes total sense, right? Like, you have your unique, distinct voice at your broadcast. I was calling for that for years. But the problem is, when it's a major, it's not your event. It belongs to the people. It is an apple of the people you are stealing when you apply your fucking political bullshit to it. It's meant to be free from that. It's meant to be a celebration of the game. It is meant to be about putting it all aside so the world can come together and enjoy the World Championships of Counter-Strike. That is what a major is. And if you don't have the testicular fortitude to do that, you shouldn't be running a major. You know, we never did that. It was never across political lines, our hiring. It was just that we didn't like Yanko's accent. Nothing to do with him working in ESL. Didn't give a fuck. He worked for anyone. We're E-League. We were proud that of what we were, and we knew we were the best in the business. So, you know, you get hired, and that's cool. If you're good enough for us, everything's coup de la. But anyway, that wasn't how it was going with Face It. Face It are some of the most whiny political bitches ever in the esports space. They are the guys who just whine endlessly, at after parties about what ESL are doing. Then every time they are afforded an opportunity to take the high ground, they don't, and they lash out. And so you end up with, like, Yanko should be at this event. I don't know why. I can't remember why he isn't. But they also were not going to hire Sponge. And I remember we did an episode of By the Numbers where we were saying this is outrageous, this was a disgrace. And because we were still so friendly enough with the Face It people, our opinion mattered, we were able to twist a few things. Like, I don't want to say this either, but, like, you've got Vince, who has been cruelly overlooked for a lot of the majors because it wasn't practical for him to travel. Vince had a lot of issues where he didn't want to travel for whatever reason, and then you do one in his backyard, and they weren't going to hire Vince either. Vince wasn't going to get a major. I remember we kicked up a big stink about that, and they did. They added Vince, they added Sponge. No Yanko, though, as far as I recall, which is crazy for me. And obviously, as well, you have to keep in mind that one of the things we had done at E-League, because of the joint venture with Face It, we had promoted Bardolph and DDK a lot of the time, and obviously they were coming off doing a major final. We put them in the major final at a time when they were nowhere near the best duo. I like them. I think they bring a different flavour, a different style, but I've never rated them as number one. And certainly in the era of, like, Henry and Sadikist, Moses was casting now with Anders, the start of Anders, Moses. They're not at the races compared to those guys. And it's a hard comparison because Henry G. Sadikist is our Tastosis in CS. But, you know, you look at like Lawrence and Scrawny are better than that pairing was. Harry and Hugo are better than that pairing was. Like, this is coming from somebody that's worked on, you know, TV, producing, like, Emmy-nominated TV shows. Like, well, one, E-League, not shows plural. But we did 2 seasons. And so I think my opinion matters. But at the end of the day, I'm not saying they're bad. They're definitely good enough to do majors. They're definitely an elite level casting pairing. But, you know, when you look at the names that were there, they can't hold a candle to some of the other duos. And obviously, their style in an arena is good. They're very good with the people, very good in public. Their style for online games or low-stakes games is tedious and not great. You know, like, they'll meander into talking about things. And that's fine. There's a time and a place for that type of broadcast. You know, that type of. So anyway, that's just something. There was fuckery there. Threat got to be an analyst because he was a Faceit employee. Sponge nearly didn't. Daps was a fucking analyst at this. I don't even know what that was predicated on. Pimp comes in from the cold. Sean Gares, that's great. I wanted Sean Gares to do E-League, but, you know, he had other commitments. So it was just crazy to me, the fuckery that was going on. And then the other thing was, we were like saying, well, look, man, it's London. It's our major. It's the first time. Like, maybe get, like, you know, some of the greats involved, you know, maybe like a fucking Red Eye, you know, like, even if it's just for a spot, maybe get Joe Miller in just for a spot, maybe get T-Man in just for a spot, you know, like, show, like, some sort of reverence to the fucking history. The gift the UK gave to CSGO was the broadcasts, the talent, the voices, you know, maybe do that, right? No interest in that at all whatsoever. And obviously as well, you know, the Freya is in. I've got no issue with that, by the way. That's fine. Freya's great. And Machine was now the host. He was now the esports host. When I left E-League, I recommended 2 names. And I said, hire either Alex is my replacement, because he's young, he's down with the kids, he's good looking. It's the tonal contrast of going from an overweight bald man to going to someone who looks like The Weeknd. Or you contact Apollo, you contact him at ESL, and you get him out of retirement. And then you keep a sort of debonair, suave, British presence. That's a very traditional broadcaster. In that sense, with the right level of polish for American TV. Those were my 2 recommendations. By this point, as I said, Alex goes on to be just a god-tier host. He's doing the CS Major, he's doing League Worlds, he's doing TI, you know what I mean? Like, he's just on another planet right now. So that's fine. That's all good. Anyway, not really happy with the way the broadcast was handled. You'll notice no Thorin as well. Basically, for reasons behind the scenes, Thorin and James have never got along. Some of the tensions got ramped up when Thorin wasn't having a good time at E-League, and they'd had arguments at other events, and so no Thorin. So, you know, you've got that. So this is where we end up creating the No Majors Club. So basically, as a joke, I didn't know it was going to become a running thing. We basically created the No Majors Club here because obviously we weren't included in the fucking, major, and we knew we could restream the games through Go TV because no one was being weird about this. So that's just the broadcast side of things, with the Iron Fist being ruled and friendships of yesteryear being completely ignored. Remember as well, this was another $1 million prize pool event. So what happens at the fucking London Major? Right, well, what indeed? So day 1, people might not remember this, there was a internet outage for half a day at the venue, just gone. So there was just a huge, ridiculous delay at the event. Some of the games had to spill over to like day 2. Then you had tons and tons and tons of player complaints about the accommodations, which was shonky, particularly the food. They were actually rationing the breakfast buffet, which is just so staggering to me, that apparently the hotel was so inundated with players and staff, and they'd all put them in one spot. They were worried about running out of food, and so were limiting how much food you could eat at breakfast. Then Pasha, a popular player, obviously, famously tweeted out saying, we're being told, I'm a bodybuilder, I want to work out, and I'm being told I can't have more than 2 eggs at breakfast. And so that's where we get the unlimited eggs meme, because Faceit management went to the hotel and said, look, if you run out of food, we'll work something out. But please, let people use a buffet as a buffet. And they put a tweet out saying, we now have unlimited eggs. And they actually boasted about that. So that's the overall quality of this event at the start. You got no internet, no eggs, right? Like, what's happening? It's like Brexit. We ended up with a patch dropping during the event. Valve did one of their classic updates. And this update broke the game. No, Richard, it didn't break the game. It changed. No, it broke the game. It actually broke the game at the major. And they played the games with it being broken. So the bug was sometimes on some maps, but particularly Inferno, which was nearly every map at this fucking godforsaken major, you wouldn't hear footsteps. Footsteps just wouldn't be made by a player on the server. So you would be playing, and then someone with the silent running fucking perk from Warzone would fucking just stealthily come round a corner and pop you in the fucking head. And it just so happened... Sorry, dead silence. That's what it's called. Whatever, who gives a fuck? Warzone's for losers. So anyway, this happened more times in North games than any other game. They got absolutely wrecked by this. And so as a result, North went out. They lost to Vega Squadron. I mean, by the way, this is the start of the end of MSL's career. This completely fucked him, but they just had to muddle through. And it lasted. It wasn't like, a couple of games and it lasted. It basically fucking was there for days until they identified which fucking line of spaghetti code they had to pull. And everyone was complaining about it. On top of that, the equipment at the event was ridiculous. The monitors they used were stuttering, doing that flickering on and off. There was FPS drop, all sorts of problems with the setup. Players were tweeting saying it was the worst stuff they've ever played on, a supposed S-tier tournament. Players were absolutely fucking fuming about the event. And then, obviously, you get a ton of really dog shit games. The top 8 here is dreadful. You have a complexity lineup with Android and Death and Shazam in the top 8 at a major. You have Big again, but the one with Smooya, the Smooya Big. You have the Hellraisers lineup with Dead Fox and Bondic and Angel, right? This is the top 8 in a major, by the way, right? And then, obviously, this is the Liquid lineup people were super hopeful about, where Taco was in it. And it was Nitro Elise, Twist, and Half Taco, with Zeus as coach, who Reddit tells me is just an NFT salesman these days. Oh, yeah, and you had the fucking MIBR super team, where Stewie2K and Tarek joined MIBR. Right? So what a weird bunch of teams in the top 8 in a major. And of course, by this point, you have just got Magisk and Astralis, right? So, I mean, this is the freest shit of all time. Astralis didn't drop a map in playoffs. They lost to Liquid in the Legend stage. They just don't drop a map. They just go all the way through. They batter everyone. They get Na'Vi in the final. Yes, it's simple electronic, but it's still Edward and Zeus Na'Vi, right? And if you look at the actual results, after the FaZe Clan game, which is the best of the quarterfinals, there's just not a game for Astralis. The last game they have is against FaZe. There's 16-14, 16-12. Wow, that was close. What can Liquid do against them? They get banged out 16-8, 16-7. Then you're in the final. Well, okay, Na'Vi are in the final. Oh my God, it's simple, it's electronic. 16-6, 16-9. Not to mention, the big Na'Vi game, 16-2, 16-6. I mean, these are some of the most dull, one-sided games we've seen in a major playoffs up to this point. So you've got internet problems. You've got a patch that breaks it. You're out of eggs. You also have just a ton of other tech problems. The broadcast was going down or whatever. You've put these legendary casters, in a place where they've got nothing to work with. The games are dog shit. You've got all the hiring bullshit behind the scenes. This is what drove a weird fucking wedge, with the talent. And this is why, again, this never gets talked about publicly, But face it, we're on some fucking tyrannical shit here with this major. Like, it was some bullshit. I mean, like, I want to say the show match was trash. They did a fucking Smooya versus Reign show match, where it was like, well, of course, Bardolph has to play in the show match as well. DDK has to play on the other team. Everything about this major was shit. Like, for real. And obviously, as well, we've got the VODs of the No Majors Club from this time. Yeah, that was Ziwu. Yeah. I think Ziwu... Is that London? Yeah, I think Ziwu did play there, didn't he? Because that was when everyone thought he was a cheater. But anyway, everything about this major sucked. There was no shoulder... I think it was the first time as well there weren't any shoulder content or documentaries. That had just stopped for some reason. And it was just such a fucking nightmare. Oh, this was the ROPS one, my bad. Yeah, the ROPS one. That pretty much was the best of the shoulder content. But it was just pretty much across the board. Everything failed and was super underwhelming. The final, drab, like just a real boring final. Like Na'Vi never in it. Like 16-6, 16-9 in the final. Astralis all conquering. Everyone trying to hype it up. This major for me is D tier. I think conceivably the worst major. A lot of people disagree. Definitely a D-tier major for me. Next, the Katowice Major 2019. The adults are back in the room. ESL's got another major. All right. Now, unfortunately for this major takes place during one of the worst metas. Because if I remember correctly, this is when we've got the emergence of the fucking Organ Krieg meta. This was not a fun time if you were a fan of good Counter-Strike. In fact, I would say this is the beginning of the end of good Counter-Strike. The Krieg meta just started it off. So, let's talk about the broadcast as we are wont to do. This was a strange one. There were more observers than commentators at Katowice 2019. Can you believe that? It's true. Look it up on Wikipedia. They hired something like 6 observers, but there were only 4 commentators. It was the Henry G. Sadakist Moses Vince pairing. This was Vince's second major. Vince, ESL were quite savvy in how they corrected community perception, right? They were like, look, everyone felt Vince coming in to do one fucking series was an insult, which it was. You either hire someone or you don't. And it's like blast punking out Harry and Hugo in Paris. What they lack in quantity, they make up for in quality. This is fantastic. You have OJ Borg stage host, the legend. I mean, has there been a better stage host in CS? Like, real talk. I know we've had, Puckett he's done some CS. Puckett's up there. But he's technically a COG guy. He's done most of his work in there. OJ Borg, how it all came about, because obviously he's talked about it before, but how OJ Borg ends up coming into ESL is literally just on the basis of, he's interested in video games. ESL reached out to him because they were looking at having more media-savvy presence. He agreed to do it. Remember, he's a BBC radio host, and he just come on and just fucking absolutely nailed it. Nailed the tone. I've had the pleasure of working events with him, hanging out with him. He's been on the podcast. He's a lovely human being, a wonderful guy, model professional. And I think even though we've not had a lot of him, I think he lays claim to being the best stage host CS has ever seen. And I say that with all due respect to all the other S-tier stage hosts that we've had down the years, including Hall of Famers like Red Eye and stuff. There's something about OJ Borg's energy. There's something about the way he holds a crowd's attention. There's something about the way that he's always able to find that good interview. It's just masterful media work, which I really, really appreciate. You have him, Stunner at a major. Listen, I remember when me and Stunner first met, we nearly had a fist fight. Stunner was drunk. He was a Cloud9 manager. I was drunk. I was thinking he was being an arsehole and trying to get my protective swagger on. And so, anyway, we had a fucking standoff where he was saying to me, "You don't want to fuck with me, I'm a Marine." And I'm going, "You don't want to fuck with me, I live in Middlesbrough." It was like that. So it was ridiculous. And I'm glad we're friends now, because that would have been an ugly scene. And Stunner is a wonderful guy, and I love him very much. So anyway, Stunner's at this major, alternating with Alex. Stunner's energy is completely different, like to what an average host does. And I remember when he first started hosting, Stunner reached out to me because again, like we kissed and made up very quickly after that thing. Because I think Hiko was still on Cloud9, and Spencer was like, you've got to You've got to talk to Stunner about this and just smooth it over. It's silly, you guys are fighting. You'd really like each other if you would just talk to each other over a bit. And he was right, because Spencer's a level-headed dude. So anyway, Stunner, when he said he was moving into desk work, he hit me up and he said, "Can you give me some pointers and give me and then watch me and then give me your thoughts?" And I said to him then, and I said, "Dude, you know what your best attribute is? It's the interviews. It's being in the crowd with a mic in your hand, meeting people, not feeling threatened, because obviously you've been in more difficult situations in your life than, getting pushed by a fan. The legendary beach ball clip is like god tier shit. I'm still inclined to say that by gaining Stunner as a host, we lose an S-tier interviewer. And I know we've got lots of interviewers. I think it's a bit of an easier art form than hosting. Having done both, I think interviewing is easier. But good crowd work is a skill, and Stunner has it. But what I will say is, I said to him, desk hosting will be too much, I think. I think you won't enjoy it. And I think, you're a big enough personality, you won't, you might accidentally inject yourself a bit too much into the show. That's what I said. So I have watched his development, and this is obviously, major as a host. You know what? I mean, he definitely proved me wrong. I don't think he's the best host we've ever had, but I think he has a style that is very much unique, very much Stunner. You get legendary clips out of him. Like the Thorin Black Monster clip is just so, it's like something in The Office, because the way it cuts from Thorin, and by the way, I mean, it's such an unbelievably edgy clip in retrospect. I can't believe anyone got away with it, right? Again, happier times maybe. But the way the camera cuts to Stunner and Stunner's face is so perfect. It's like The Office. So Stunner has his own fucking brand, his own vibe, his own energy, and I like it. And I like hosts. I like alternating hosts. It's good if you have one because you can create a coherent narrative, but it's also, refreshing. Oh, it's a different guy today. We're gonna do it like this. So for me, he's great at what he does, and I don't know where he's at right now. I know obviously PGL don't like him because he's considered a dirty ESL acolyte, but I hope we see more of Stunner in the future, and it was definitely welcome here. I love the analyst pick. As I said, Sponge is the man. Sean Gares, great stuff. Pimp, this is the emergence of Frankie as well as an interviewer in the crowd. I think she's great. And obviously, ESL get to return the favour. And no, DDK and Bardolph, you will not be at this major. Now, by the way, I have to say, obviously, just to be morally and consistent, it sucks that ESL didn't treat it like a major. Forecasters isn't enough, and DDK and Bardolph should probably just be in consideration for legacy purposes at this stage, if nothing else. But absolutely, after what you pulled in London, fuck your moral high ground or lack of it, and yeah, you're not at this major, dickhead, because it's an ESL major, dickhead, and that's how it works, right? So anyway, this major is great. It's a banger. The meta at the time sucks, and because of that, we ended up with some pretty wild fucking sort of teams emerging. But particularly, this is the Ents major. Ents had a legendary run. They only got through by the seat of their pants. Remember, they nearly pulled a Cloud9 because in the Legend stage, Ents go Orton 2 down. And everyone's like, how's your org today, dickhead? Right? And then they come back and they win 3 best of 3s on the bounce. They beat Big, G2, and Avanga. and go through to the final 8, and suddenly everyone's up on them, but they get Team Liquid. Well, they get one great map there. The Inferno was really good. This is back when Inferno was fun to watch and not excruciating, even with the Krieg meta. But of course, lurking in the dark, it's Astralis, as they're always waiting. The Na'Vi game is super weird, because you've got Ents have 2 16-14 games against Na'Vi, and the map they lost 16-3. So it was like a blowout and some close games. I think this was Zeus and Edward's last hurrah with Na'Vi. I'm pretty sure, if I remember, we did it by the numbers, where we were saying, they've got to go, Robbie, they've got to go. Na'Vi should have been in this final. Na'Vi Astralis been beaten by Ents. It's embarrassing, blah, blah. So, it was one of them. And then obviously Ents get to the final with Astralis, but this is Prime Astralis. This is an Astralis that, they just don't lose. They 16-2 nip in the quarterfinals. They fucking 16-7 MIBR. Put it this way, every series, Astralis had one map that was kind of close and a blowout. That's just what they were doing to people. And so obviously you have the final. This is a solid broadcast. The crowd was really good. This goes off with few technical problems. There was no dramas. The only thing that people really criticize it for is there was kind of this boring inevitability of Astralis potentially winning. And so because by 2019, people hate Astralis. They're already out on them. They're winning all these tournaments. They're looking so fucking good all the time. They've had this sustained period of success. They're just so boring. They're just so boring. And I never understood that, because when you are witnessing a great team, I can understand it's frustrating if it's not your team. But when that team falls off and somebody else takes over the mantle, you will always remember that greatness with a fond nostalgia. It's I used to despise Alex Ferguson's Man United. I used to despise them. I used to despise the way they could intimidate refs to get 7 minutes of extra time, aka Fergie time, and win with a last minute goal. I used to fucking despise the way they would get, if Fergie could mug off the FA and not do interviews because they pointed out his son was dodgy. I used to hate the way that their players were some of the, it felt like they were just an aggressive, dirty bunch, I used to hate them, and I especially what they did to Newcastle in the 95-96 season. So for me, I used to hate that team. Man, that team was fucking great, and I don't hate them anymore. I love Roy Keane now. I love Roy Keane. I used to pray for Roy Keane's legs to snap every time he stepped on the field. I fucking love that guy now. I never thought I would be in a world where I like Gary Neville. I just watched his interview with Dele Alli the other day. It's some of the, it really shows what a fucking great guy Gary Neville is. Gary Neville's a great human being. Who fucking knew? Ryan Giggs is a piece of shit. But anyway, you should never hate greatness. It's pathetic. At the end of the day, the fact that so many people were down on Astralis at this time is kind of sad. And this major gets a lot of flack for that. It's not really anyone's fault. So yes, this is an A-tier major. This is good. It had some good games. The meta wasn't great. That certainly held it back, but it went off without a hitch. Good matches, continuation of the Astralis dynasty, good broadcast, excellent. Right, next we get Berlin. Ooh, God. The Berlin Start Later Major. Do you remember it being called that? Because yes, there were non-stop fucking delays with this game. This was another one I think I got asked. Again, I can't remember. I didn't have the in with Starladder, but I might have been asked to host it. And again, I think at this point, I am just earning so much money in Vegas, I just didn't want to travel, didn't want a transatlantic flight for $1,000 a day. Just didn't matter to me. I was just burning cash in Vegas. So I just was like, nah, it's all good. Nah, I'm fine. I'm just chilling. I'm just doing WSOE. So this major, we did another No Majors Club, didn't we? You remember this one? And obviously, this is where all the memes come from. But let's just get into it. Let's talk about Starladder as an organizer. Obviously, they don't do a lot of events now. I don't know if they're actually defunct. Obviously, their stuff would be on hold anyway because they're a Ukraine-based based organization. But Starladder became notorious behind the scenes for not paying people their fucking money on time. It was like a rite of passage to be chasing Starladder for fucking months to get your paper. And I think I did a story about it. I know Vince came out and spoke about it, which, I can't remember when that was, but it's Vince isn't at this major. And it's only in Berlin. I'm sure he could have made it. This major had so many tech problems, like nearly as many as Krakow. Like, I'm sure when you go and look at the NMC VODs, they're all about 16 hours long because there was just so much fucking downtime. And the thing is, it's Germany. It's not their infrastructure, for fuck's sake. You're in Berlin, There's no excuse. A lot of it was like settings and incompetence, and there was server issues. Players were all complaining again about equipment and FPS drops, and You just had a ton of fucking problems, just tech problems with this one. Obviously, as well, we're still fucking in, this is the Astralis era, but we'll get to that in a moment. So, what happens at Starladder? This is the one where, and I don't know what was going on. I can't remember if Henry and Sadakist had sort of like had problems, marital problems by this point. But I think, there was like an ongoing thing behind. Henry won't mind. I'm sure he's talking. It was basically like an ongoing thing. They were getting to the stage. Like, the trouble with duos is it comes with like a lot of extra baggage. Like, you spend a lot of time with people, particularly back in the esports days when they would put caster duos in rooms with each other, to try and save a little bit of money. Thankfully, that practice ended, many years ago. But this was basically, like, Henry and Sado had been, like, Sadakist is a brilliant genius. Sadakist is like but he's erratic, would be a good way to put it. I mean, people might describe me similarly, but, Matt's like a dude who, if he gets something in his head, he's definitely going to bring it up. If something's not right, he's definitely going to address it. And if somebody is being a cunt, he's not afraid of the old stare down. Let's put it that way. And so, this is... There was... Henry, on the other hand, is like a chilled out stoner type dude. And so, but likes to party, but they generally would rather be high, having a good time, high and mellow, just chilling, rather than out aggressively drinking. You know what I mean? Like, it's... So, right there, just at the fundamentals, there were issues in terms of how they would like to unwind, and so I think they'd had like a few wobbles at this point. But it's Sadakist, so you want him involved in the major. So Sadakist is actually the desk host. Now, remember at the time, Matt was talking about maybe going permanently in that direction. That he was like, listen, I can do casting, I can do desk hosting. This is like a welcome change for me. And I remember saying, like, that's insane to me because you are still like the goated play-by-play caster in CSGO history. I mean, like, real talk, we've had some of the best casters ever in esports. I mean, no shit. Like CS is just that incubator for like amazing broadcast talent, like, no doubt about it. Like, if you were to stack up all of the esports games, compare all the talent, what is it? It's fucking CS just comes out on top. I don't give a fuck what anyone says. The only thing that might come close for me is like maybe Golden Era StarCraft, maybe. And there's a lot of names doing some heavy lifting in that. I'll tell you that for free. League of Legends isn't even top 3 for me. So anyway, I was adamant that, like, Matt, don't fucking be a desk host. Not just because you would potentially be I mean, I was sort of semi-retired now anyway, but not because you would potentially be cutting in on my paper, but also because, like, you've got to be casting. You have to. You're like the best. But he did hosting, and it's fine. The only criticism is, of course, because he's not used to it, a little bit of too much exuberance, too much talking, too much of a point. And they had a really shit hot analysis desk for this. Thorin, Sponge, Sean Gares, and Pimp. It's only 4 analysts, but it is one of the best analyst desks. Certainly the best you could have put together at that time. And maybe, like I say, I don't know where. Yanko's off coaching at this point, and so obviously he's not available. And I'm trying to think if Maniac was actually working as a desk host now. But anyway, it was basically right. The desk was on point here, and Stunner did it as well. So interviewers, It's the rise of James Banks, the monster, the man, the beast. James Banks, the fucking Jackanory king of esports, the ubiquitous Banks, and Smix, who, again, is just great and really sorely missed. She's working at a talent agency now, and we don't see her do a lot of broadcast work, but she is certainly missed. But anyway, casters, this is when Henry was going with Machine, Anders was with Moses, Harry and Hugo got to do this major, which, you know, should have been an indicator of their caliber. I think the community were really slow on the uptick as to how good they actually are. So, you know, actually the talent hires are really, really good here. They're really, really good. But, you know what wasn't good? The observing. And do you know why the observing wasn't good at the start, later major? They used a crew of non-native English speakers that were mainly experienced in PUBG at a major. And so anyway, Sliggy was the English dude at this event. And that's Sliggy over at Valorant now. You'll have to fucking talk to him about it at some point, because Connor said that, you know, basically this was like a fucking nightmare. This was a nightmare because he had to work with the other observers to try and get them to just watch the right things at the right times in the right way, but communication was so fucked up and so difficult. He was just fighting a losing battle permanently. And if I remember rightly, even though it's not listed on Liquipedia, I think they flew Prius out for this one. I think they had to reach out to another observer, and basically I think it was Prius they got. But they basically flew in Prius, and they fucking, you know, said, like, please, like, take over. It could have been SEO as well. I can't really remember, but they definitely had to fly in extra observers. And what was really funny is, because Reddit is just filled with morons, when those observers, because they didn't say what games they were observing, they were making threads going, please replace these shit observers. And then it was like Prius or SEO in the replies going, I observed that game. Fucking Reddit, dude. Just gotta get that circle jerk in. So anyway, I'm pretty sure they had extra ones, but anyway, whatever. Who gives a fuck who remembers how it went down? The bottom line is, like, it was PUBG observers that didn't speak English trying to show you CS, and it was shit. It was shit for days. And so they had to take the unbelievable measure of flying observers that know what they were doing rather than just hire them in the first place. So you go from having a broadcast talent pool that's fucking god tier to having an actual broadcast that's fucking shit tier, because you're missing all the action. You're missing all the fucking games. Not to mention, as I said, a ton of delays. Then we had the drama with, if you were at home just streaming the game, this is where it all comes from. This is where it comes from, this bullshit rule. Now, by the way, I'll just tell you this flat out, right? Tournament organizers do not own CS. They didn't make CS. They don't own CS. They have no legal claim to its copyright whatsoever. And yet, what Starladder started doing was, popular streamers were watching, including, happened to me too, non-popular streamers, popular streamers were watching the fucking Go TV, like everyone had been doing up until this point, and Starladder were DMCAing him. DMCA'd Flom, he'd come on the No Majors Club to talk about it at the time, then they went after me. And I told them, if you come after me with a fucking bogus DMCA claim, I will I've got a lawyer that will just defend it. And we can go to court, and we can prove that you don't own the copyright to CS. And it'll be a dunk. Okay, it'd be so easy. That's what I told them. I told them I got summoned to a Discord to sit with like some dickhead from Starladder, and basically they were like going, well, we are DMCAing all of the. Oh, it was Sliggy that came in midway. So anyway, I was sat on Discord, it was, with like some dickhead from Starladder, and I basically just told him that. And I said, look, this is how it goes. You strike my channel, I will fucking strike you, right? Like, and I will strike you in court, because you didn't make Counter-Strike. You didn't make it. You don't own the copyright. If I show something from the game client, you have no legal copyright claim to that whatsoever. It is not even the game. I'm not even on your server. It's not even the game that's being played. It is an algorithmic reinterpretation of the action taking place on the server. That is what GoTV is. So you have no claim. None. Absolutely none. And I had the lawyer on standby who said, yeah, fuck it, this will be banter, let's do it. And remember, I'm just money bags rich at this point, like fucking, $250,000 a year, like, yeah, just $250,000 a year, no wife, no kids, yeah, woo, fucking let's spend. So happy to pay a lawyer to fucking mix up your shit. So anyway, they basically went away and said, oh, you're okay. And I was like, yeah, I fucking know I'm okay. Legally, I'm on absolutely rock solid ground. But what they also did was they went back and fucking said to Valve, like, if people like him are going to stand up to us and it gets out and he's talking about it on his stream, other people are going to do the same and it's going to fuck up our broadcast numbers, so we need you to do something. And then obviously the upshot of that is Valve fucking come out and basically make up some bogus compromise, which is like, oh, actually, tournament operators can set the standards by which you stream, and you have to beg permission and remove sponsors, and and you have to tick all these boxes just to stream fucking Go TV, right? And that, by the way, in Dota, that wasn't happening at all. Remember when ESL stopped Admiral Bulldog from streaming Dota, and they basically came in and told ESL, if you DMCA anyone broadcasting the games, we will fuck you up. That's what they said. Nah, fuck you though, CS. Fuck your streamers and your personalities. I basically was having none of that, and I'm still having none of that, because when you read these agreements, it makes outrageous claims. They're still saying, and this isn't just StarLadder now, this is all of these tournaments, they say they own the demo file. How the fuck do you own a demo file? How do you lay claim to a demo file? It's mad. Like, we talked about it on By the Numbers at the time. You could technically, with that agreement, if I take a demo and make a YouTube video out of it, well, I did it using their demo file. Can they DMCA the footage? Can they DMCA my video? According to Valve, yes. So no, this thing was a fucking absolute fucking mess. This was an absolute mess, and I'm having none of it. And I will stream what I want on your fucking through the game. If it's there to be streamed, I will stream it, and there will be no legal claims, because you don't have a legal claim to CS, because you don't make sense. Doesn't matter if Valve give you temporary permission. Doesn't matter if Valve are backing that you hold all these standards in. You still did not make CS and have no claim to its copyright. So fuck StarLadder forever just for that, because you look at where we're at now with core streaming. And a big part of the reason core streaming has gone in the direction of, it's not just anyone streaming it, it's now a little approved cabal and clique. And you'll notice Flom doesn't even come by the No Majors Club no more. Why? Because people don't like me, because I say shit like this on stream, and fucking, what if I say it on their streams, and then they're going to lose their, oh, you're in the core streaming partner program. I don't need a partner program to stream Go TV, right? It's as simple as that. I don't need a partner program to stream Dota TV. I'll never ask fucking permission. So fuck that. And anyway, like now, because of what StarLadder did here, and it set a precedent, because not everybody wanted to lawyer up, not everybody was willing to risk losing their channel, not everybody got StarLadder to back down. Basically, now we end up with what we got, which is you watch like a fucking core stream now from an event, and it's like just depressing. It's just like you look at the names, and you're like, oh, okay. And they're the only people that get to do it now. Like, look at this stuff. Look at this shit. They're not even foreign language streams. You've got the rise of Gaules, which is one of the worst, most cancerous things that ever happened to esports. By the way, including Brazilian esports. In fact, actually, it's the worst thing to happen to Brazilian esports, the rise of Gaules. Oh, you all love the Gau. I get it, right? But let me give you some home truths about what Gaules does behind the scenes. Gaules took all of them casters that were fucking doing CS and said, you come into my company if I like you, right? And you work for me, and we'll outsource it. And if you don't want to do that, and you don't want to deal with me being the big swinging dick, we're just gonna take all your work, your call. And so some people didn't want to live like that. Some people didn't want to fucking work under the tyrannical regime of a fucking an overweight megalomaniac. You know what I mean? So they fucking pieced out, didn't they? They're in Valorant now, they're in other games. And that's why you end up with the fucking major in Rio, which, we're getting to that, which is like, he's not even casting the games. He's just doing like some Brazilian fucking rally, the Brazilian political rally. Yeah, we'll never understand. ESL don't even speak Portuguese. Like, what is happening here at a fucking major? It's an insult. So anyway, you've got, because of this bullshit like stuff, you don't end up with the rise of the Gau to the same degree. Yeah, he's pulling his own mafia shit. He's pulling some gangster shit. That's fine. But then, like, come on, man. guys, like, we've got to be able to do better than own a pixel. Like, I'm just saying straight up, like, we've got to be able to do better than that. I know he's popular with the kids, but, you know, so's chicken pox. Do you know what I mean? So I'm just saying, like, we've got to be able to do better than that. It's just fucking crazy to me, you know, like, where we're at in terms of the approved streamerati that get to do it. And it's fucking embarrassing. It's embarrassing it went in this direction. And it all happened here because, essentially, you know, look, if you were smart, what you would do as a TO is you would put your fucking game on Go TV, where all of them, not just the major, you would negotiate with Valve. Maybe you only have one game on if multiple ones are played at a time. You would do something with the Go TV, because then you get to fold those numbers into it. And it's also discoverability. You might be bringing more people into esports. But they don't do that, because they only want to give out clean feeds to their approved streamers. And, oh, everyone has to watch our broadcast. You're getting the numbers anyway. You're getting the numbers, and no one's paying. Is it a pay-per-view event? No. So you are saying, by not making it pay-per-view, you are saying big number good. Now, big number isn't good. You know I don't think that. But if they think that, then make the number bigger. Why not? They don't. And you end up with, like, oh my God, Owner Pixel has just opened cases worth nothing for 6 hours. It is the best content. Oh my God. And what's also crazy is, there was like a thread about we banned Owner Pixel from my chat, because I just don't like talking to skins people. Skin cells are just weirdos. But the fucking, I think, did he message Jace to be unbanned again? Like, just out of the blue? Just please unban me. Like, bro, like, there's nothing to talk about. Like, your world and my world just don't interface. You know, skin cells. Like, it's just fucking, I got no time. I got no truck with it, like. So, yeah, he appealed. He's in the appeal queue. Like, come on. Anyway, back to Star Ladder, fuck it. So, look, this is an abysmal tournament. The tech issues are a thing. The fucking games are shit. Let me remind you of this. Look at the top 8 here and try and get excited. Ents, Renegades, Vitality, a Vanguard. And by the way, you go, oh, Vitality are good. Wrong. This was the Alex Vitality with MBK still in it. It was getting to the end of his career. So, Vitality, a Vanguard. NRG Narvi, right? This is NRG with Ethan, Cirque, Breezy, Stanislaw, right? And Astralis Team Liquid. So immediately, right, you're like, oh, okay, well, there's one team that really fucking stands out there. There's one team that's a little bit better than all the others, isn't there? And so that's exactly how it panned out. Astralis, they batter Team Liquid. They batter NRG. They get into the final against the Vanguard. A Vanguard get 11 rounds across 2 maps. The Vanguard Renegades game is just, like, so sad. Because, like, I don't know. Maybe there's something there if it's, yeah, the boys. I don't know. But in the end, it's a Vanguard, and you know how they play CS, because it eventually went on to be the foundations of Virtus Pro. This is the Sanji, Jame, Quicket and Buster team. It is dreadful CS. They had nothing. They couldn't even bore Astralis to death. That major final is one of the worst. It's one of the worst games ever played at a major, let alone one of the worst finals. It's dreadful. But Astralis were just too good. They were just on some other shit back now. And you combine all the other problems, you combine the community drama, fuck Star Ladder, fuck them forever. That's a D tier. You're in the D's. And yeah, I know Team Liquid chokes. They had to play Astralis, and they always choked against Astralis, and it wouldn't have been different if they met them in the final. But, you know, whatever. Whatever, punk. Right, next. Oh, yeah, COVID happens. Wah, 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 wah. Yeah, COVID happens, so we get a major. So we just don't get any majors. We had the one in Rio cancelled because Rio plunged into a fucking nightmare during the COVID times. Remember Bolsonaro, a man who said that if you have a vaccine, it might turn you into a crocodile, and then nearly died of COVID. So we don't do anything until 2021, and then it's Stockholm. And by God, is that Richard Lewis's music? I'm afraid it is. It's the Stockholm Major in 2021. It's the first major with the crowd coming back from COVID. Lots has happened. Lots has changed. I mean, like, living through the COVID era of CS is just so batshit insane to look back on now. You know, like, it's just wild. Just absolutely wild. And so, look, I don't need to tell you how bad this major was. because there's a episode of BTN called the Green Room Edition that just dishes everything. You know what? I'll say something that might shock you. I got asked to do this like a long time before the event came up. PGL did their usual thing of like, hey, you want to work this event? We'd love to have you. You know, we love you. We get all the old guys back. We're going to do this old thing. And you've got total input on, you know, hiring. You tell us who you want there. And then when I got the list of proposed people, I was like, you know, I said at the time, where are the chicks, man? Like, what the fuck is this? You can't do a 2015 Sausage Fest in 2021. So figure it the fuck out. I said, and it's also, by the way, it's a fucking insult to people like Freya and Frankie who've been working CS. You say it's an old boys event. Get the old guard back. You know, where's Pansy? Where's Smix? I brought it up. I said it. I said the things, and no one listened to me. So I was already like, we're in a bad vibe here, and I nearly thought about pulling out. When all that drama was kicking off, I was like, maybe I just don't want to be associated with this. You haven't done an event in a while. Let's be real. They ain't fucking fun. But the only thing that got me across was all the haters that have been saying I was irrelevant, right? All the haters saying I was irrelevant, just coming back just so I could say who's relevant now, dickhead. How's my relevance today, dickhead? That was literally it. That was the only thing that got me to do this event. People don't realise there was a period where I was offered any event I wanted. Like, I could have worked way more events than I did. But event work isn't fun, guys. It's not fun. It puts stress on friendships. It puts stress on relationships at home. Keeps you away from your wife, your kids. I ain't got none of them, but I got drinking buddies, and I do like spending time with them, and I don't get to do that. At the end of the day, it's just fucking so much. It's so much. It's so demanding. The travel, you always get sick, the lack of sleep, you know, the stress of live TV, the abuse. And people don't get it, man. It's a mad fucking world. Like, especially if you're like an analyst saying, you're just there live, 100,000 people watching you, you express an opinion they don't like. They come, they find you, they abuse you, you know, we're seeing all that stuff with Maui. You know, it's shit. It's completely fucking shit. You know, I was like, Spike basically dragged me across the line to do this one. Now, the drama around the lack of the hiring women as well, when the NIP CEO or whatever he's called, Jonas, he fucking literally said there was only one non-white person at the event as well, which of course wasn't true. Like, he wasn't counting Blair, not counting Alex, who's like dual heritage, and he brought race to it, right? And then obviously was like saying, what about where are the women at? Where's the diversity? Now, did NIP just play in a qualifier for the Saudi Arabian state-owned Gamers 8 Festival? A completely voluntary qualifier they absolutely didn't have to fucking play in. Oh, right, okay, you really care about the fucking suffragette movement, yeah? I mean, fuck them. That's a joke. That whole thing was a joke, but avoidable. They just do stupid things. It's just so fucking, you know, ridiculous. But I'll never let them off the hook for that. Never. But anyway, it's a PGL event. They hired a great crew. They had, obviously, you know, Freya on the stage. She, you know, continues to evolve. She's fantastic. They had me on the desk. They had, obviously, we got Thorin, we got Yanko, we got Maniac, we got Blair. And like I say, I hadn't worked a lot with Blair in the past. I knew him, obviously. I'd seen his work. What we wanted to do at this event was really work on, like, establishing him as a sort of more of a mainstream talent. Because Blair was always known as, like, the Asian dude. Like, he's the dude who knows about the Asian scene, and he's the Asian specialist that you bring in if you want to know what's happening on that continent. And it was, like, really fucking reductive, you know? Like, I thought, I wanted to, like, sort of hype him up a bit more and just be like, you know, he's a guy who's been doing this, DreamHack, and he's an expert on, like, you know, some of the lower tier CS, you might say, and stuff like that. So he's like the guy with his ear to the ground, basically, which isn't a comment on his height. And anyway, I was very impressed with Blair. What I liked about Blair was, like, on a desk with Thorin, Blair probably said the edgiest shit. Fucked up thing was, it was all going so well, and then suddenly two things happened. So it's all going well, and everyone's saying Richard Lewis is great, and it's so good he's back, and the desk has been so good, and oh my god, this is fantastic, must invest. And then the heroic thing happened, where they over-celebrated, and they just scraped through, And I said, like, you know, if you're celebrating like that after how poor you played in the groups, you know, you might not want to fucking, you know, I like just made a point, like, saying you probably should calm it down a little bit. And so immediately, oh my God, Richard is a arsehole. Forgotten how bad he was. Why is this guy here? Why is he? Because I'd made the fatal error, you see. I said a player might have done something wrong. You can't do that in CS. Can't do that in any esport now. So obviously, yeah, it was like immediate, like getting fired, people petitioning to get me fired, Reddit threads, all of that nonsense. Just sat there like going, why did I put myself through this again? Just to fuck, I know, nearly walked off. Just in my brain, like, what happens if I just walk off? What happens? Nothing, right? Don't want to work another one. Already told them I don't want to be back for Antwerp, so I mean, fuck it. Which they offered. So anyway, there was that, and that was just a bad vibe. Then Thorin did the bye-bye Dever thing, didn't he? When they lost. I think that's at Stockholm, right? We were cut into a break, and Thorin and Device had like, I don't know, some weird fucking online... No, it's not weird, actually. Like, what had happened was, made a comment about Device crying to his girlfriend during a blast. And Device had saw it and fucking basically called him out on Twitter. And then Thorin went mega on him, as he does, because he hates it when players do it. And basically, Astralis, as it was at the time, went to Blast and said, Thorin needs to shut up or we're going to like pull out your events. You need to control his social media. Which, by the way, when you go to an event, and you're a freelance, they've got no right to ask you what you tweet, what you do, what you know, none of that stuff. They can ask you, like, tweet about the event, but it's an ask, it's not a demand. Blast then went to Thorin and basically, like, said, like, you can't tweet about Astralis again for the rest of the event. And he just said, I tweet about what I want, when I want, and there's no amount of money that ever gets you to be able to tell me otherwise. So he just quietly left the event behind the scenes. Blast just went and got on with it. He's never worked with Blast again since, I don't think. And in Duncan's mind, maybe rightly, maybe wrongly, he sort of attributed that to fucking Device having a cry, and so they didn't get along. I think when Device got knocked out of this tournament, I think like basically... he said as we went to a break, it was like, bye-bye, Dever. And he did it like that, because obviously Device tried to rename himself at one point as Dever. And yeah, basically, that, like, a load of fans were saying that was, like, mega unprofessional, and I should have done something about it, and then we got, like, a ton of hate for that as well. So basically, like, it went from being like, oh my God, it's so good that these guys are back. Yeah, where have they been? Richard's, like, a really good host, actually. Yeah, Duncan, man, we've missed this energy on the desk. This is good. You know, that was, like, week one. But by the rest of the tournament, everyone was just fucking sick of us and telling us to kill ourselves. So it was just like, well, it wasn't a good time. So we basically, like, carried on. We just persevered. But yeah, Blair said at one point, he said a team fucking played like pussies. And like, even Duncan went, like, you know. But Blair said some unbelievably harsh shit. Like, big opinions, you know. So I like Blair. I thought he was good. It was good to work with him. And I thought it was a really good desk and a really good bunch of broadcast talent. Of course, the cascading nightmare that was set off by Sadikist getting detained at an airport will remain one of the most ridiculous things that ever happened. Because if Sadikist doesn't get detained and then sent home, Moses doesn't have to cast with Anders and then gets frozen out. See, PGL love James Bardolph and DDK. I mean, I don't know if this is in the green room stuff, but they love them. And they love them specifically because while this CSGO major was on, Mr. CS, James Bardolph was doing the Apex Legends event that they were running. And they've done a ton of stuff for them, like, and I'm guessing they do it on, like, mates rates and, you know, whatever. So, basically, James was already there. He was already there doing the event. And so PGL, when they originally carved up, like, how it works, they just gave DDK and James Bardolph loads, you know, the 2 quarterfinals. It was like he was in 2 quarterfinals and the semi-final. It was like, it was crazy. And obviously Moses got nothing. And they were like, well, Sadikist is gone, so you get the show match. That was like how it originally broke down, I think. And so obviously, like, you know, Jason didn't really... Like, Jason was pissed off, but he didn't say anything or do anything. And we all got together and said, well, that just feels a bit bad. Because, you know, like, DDK was doing Valorant at the time. Hadn't been in CS for ages. James was doing Apex. They hadn't been a duo for years. The idea that, like, they just get to come back and dominate the broadcast was, like, really distasteful. I'll be honest, I thought it was distasteful. I don't know why, when I raised this point, PGL said, well, if you want it to be like this, you must tell James Bardolph. And I did, and he threatened me. He said I had to leave and get out of his personal space before the conversation turned bad. I was like, and there were people there, and they know what happened. And I was like, well, that sucks. What a terrible way for a friendship to end. But it is what it is. Egos and CS just sucked. To have and for me to be the guy saying this is how it is, and we all agree, and there's only you who's not in agreement, and that was why he called me out specifically, because even though I'm definitely not part of the old boys club. And by the way, what was really fucked up was the situation it put DDK in. DDK did not know he was going to do that and didn't co-sign that. And so DDK came up to us afterwards and was like, I'm really fucking, like, sorry about that. Like, I didn't know. And it just made everything super weird. It really just ruined the event. That was like, it was already on the precipice of being, it was dog shit. It was mega stressful. But then, like, just doing that on a broadcast. Like, just come say it to us in the fucking green room, mate. Just come and say it to us. Just come in, throw fucking tables around if you have to. Say to us, like, hey, you're all a big bunch of cunts. You'll fucking fuck me. I'll be the last event you fuck me out of. It's hilarious now, because he's pulling the same shit over at ESL, putting himself into the broadcasts and stuff, taking away people's other casting partners. And it's just like, man, you know what I mean? Like, after everything. Like, it's so crazy. Like, there's an interview with me and him when we're first getting to know each other, and it's like back when he was Arms House TV and he was doing all the FGC stuff. And like, I loved hanging out with that James. Me and him went to Belgrade together and did that fucking awful World Cup event. James was there, and he was a legend. He was so much fun, and it's just, I did when Heaven Media were partnering up with Face It. I had the pleasure of, going out in Milan, and it was like me, DDK, War Clown, Threat, and we were casting. It was wicked, and James was the man. Like, I really, really liked him. But as I say, man, there's no friends in this business, man. There isn't. As soon as you start saying this is what I think's good for the show, if you don't include them in it, they can't separate the ego from the product. And it's like, look, people, I used to say all the time. In fact, actually, here's an anecdote nobody knows. It's why when people accuse me of, like, I don't know, misogyny, for example, or being a narcissist, I know you're not going to find anyone who will say these things about me that I've worked with, because I've always been the guy who's like, let's put the show first. So when I did PUBG, when we were at WSOE, we hired all guys, great crew over in the PUBG, by the way. Like, that's how I met Hypoc, who's obviously crushing it in Valorant right now, and Avenger and those guys, and really great people. In it, obviously I knew Frankie, but Frankie was really big in PUBG. They all really liked her over there. Her bubbly style. She knew all the personalities and everything else. So anyway, I said, like, the WSOE would pay me all this money, and they wanted to put me on the desk and said, you have to be on the desk. And I said, like, you know what, though? You know what's really cool? Is the way Frankie talks to them. And she knows the game, and she knows the analysts, and she's really bubbly, and she's got all this energy there. And they were going, yeah, but Frankie's going to be, like, an interview. And I said, like, well, what if we just make Frankie the host? What if we just do that? And they were going, well, we're not paying for that. And I said, yeah, but I think if you look at the title, I am the director of talent. That's what you've hired me as, and I get to choose who works these events. So I'm taking myself out and I'm putting Frankie in, and I did. I put Frankie on the desk for what is widely regarded as the best PUBG event ever hosted. And it was the right decision. And I was involved, and I introduced the broadcast, and I did a few little bits and pieces, and did a rant at some point or whatever. But that was totally the right decision for the broadcast. So you find me another host who will take themselves out of a show and put another member of the talent pool in because it makes more sense. You won't. I did that. So my conscience is clear on all this bullshit. Saying I'm in some sort of old boys club just doesn't make sense. I was always on the outside looking in. No one gave me any chances. I got in, I got my way to E-League, and then I quit. So, that's that. So anyway, that bullshit really sucked. It really, really sucked. and I saw sides of people I didn't really like, multiple people. I came away from this like very disillusioned with esports. It was really sort of tough. But as an event, the playoffs here were full of drama. I don't need to rehash all the tech issues. This was a joke in terms of production. They hired a venue where, because it's shaped like a ball, there's very specific acoustic needs. PGL said we had unlimited money, but they wouldn't hire the venue sound guy who knows specifically how those acoustic works. They wouldn't do it. They just wouldn't do it. But they kept telling us all the time, got unlimited money. Do you want to do anything? Yeah, let's do something then. Oh, no, we're not doing that. But we got unlimited money. You said, your words, unlimited money. So it was crazy. And like I say, it was called like the fucking Globo Dome, or it got some stupid name. But, with the emphasis being on the fucking, it's the Avicii Arena now, but it used to be like the fucking Globo Dome. I can't remember, whatever the fuck. Basically, it's a dome. It's a dome. It's got like all, the globe, and that's it. It's like, and so obviously you had echo and feedback. I mean, like, listen, the first playoff game in that stadium that Anders and Semlers did, I remember Semlers, it was like giving an awkward best man speech at a wedding. He leaned into the mic and it just killed everyone in the venue. Not to mention all my legendary introduction, not legendary, I'm bigging myself up here, me being a moron with a WWE belt, making a really self-indulgent joke, the type I wouldn't do, but I promised I would do it, and the first time I was in Sweden, and of course, Lauder's girlfriend still accused me of not being able to legally enter Sweden. It's just not true, just a fiction. None of that went out to the crowd. None of it went out to the crowd, like no audio, and then the casting start for the games, feedback. Then at home, you're watching it. Weird echo every time there's applause. It's like double looped. Like, oh, dude, I don't need to go over it, man. The production here was embarrassing. This was a $2 million event, remember, as well. Biggest prize pool CS majors had, because fucking, obviously, we cancelled fucking Rio. It was all green screen. I don't like green screen. I mean, it wasn't once we got to the actual fucking event. But here's the thing, there was like one dude who fucking literally was doing 3 jobs. He was the producer, the director, and the sound engineer. And it's like, you can't fucking do that. I don't care how good he is. It's ridiculous. Anyway, so you talk about the games. We're doing the broadcast. And obviously, like, it's, everyone knows it's the Simple got his major. Nafoni was born because they fucking wilted against the team they used to have on fucking toast, blah, blah, blah. G2, obviously, as well. Like, a lot of people felt that they could win. I think it's a decent final. It's not an amazing final. The Nico Deagle, the overtime. There was like a weird rumor went around because like after Nico missed the shot, there was like a pause and he went off stage. And loads of people were spreading a rumor around. See, here's some new stuff. Like, loads of people were spreading a rumor around that he ran off to vomit. And I don't know why that rumor started, because it's not true. But that was what everybody was saying. He ran off backstage and spewed. Like, the adrenaline got to him. The thing just wasn't true. But that's what they were saying. I don't know why staff would spread that, but whatever. But overall, I think the final day was good. Right? They'd finally nailed the sound. Everything was on time. The show match that we got denied would have been great. We end up with a shit show match that nobody remembers or cares about, when we could have had a legendary show match. Remember, Thorin was meant to play in the show match. It was going to be Thorin and Device was going to let Thorin up, and we were going to make all these jokes about it. And I spent like 2 days putting together, your Kindar was in there, and like we were going to get Fiflaren in, who did actually play, I think, in the end. And anyway, we were putting it all together, and somehow it went from being like Team Thorin versus Team Get Right to Team Get Right play Copenhagen Flames. And it was all just because they couldn't be arsed. And I said, this is like what I mean about like why this event was shit for me. They basically turned around and said, I said, I put all this work in. I put in days of work. And they went, do you want us to pay you for it then? And I was like, that's not the fucking point. It's not the fucking point. They literally said, invoice us 2 extra days. And I went, that's not the point. I don't want the money. I want the moment. I want the show to be good. I want it to be memorable. I want to be associated with positive things when I do broadcast work. No. So, yeah, that was a nightmare as well. There you go. You've had 2 new bits instead of all Richie 2 stories. So basically, you get 1 good day out of this major. 1 good day. And even then, it's only half a good day because the final was good. The storyline was good. Listen, Boomich, I love you, mate. Word of advice to all future gamers. Never propose. Just never propose at an event that you've just won. Don't do it. Public proposals are fucking whack in general, in my opinion. High pressure situation if the person's not into it. But that was absolute cringe. And the problem you've got, and I know Boomich wasn't thinking of this, the problem you've got is that is there forever now, and everybody knows you're divorced or divorcing, and she leaked fake revenge porn of you and outed you as a mephedrone user and essentially got you kicked out of an RV. All of that's history as well. So just don't do it, because I mean I'm gonna be real, like, it did ruin the show. It ruined the way conceptually I wanted to end the show. And as I said, if Duncan had been hot mic'd, he'd have been cancelled. Because he was just next to me and I go, man alive, you don't want to fucking do that, mate. What's he fucking thinking? And he didn't just make the proposal, he knew who the girl was. She's fucking crazy. What you you know what I mean? And so it would be great if we got hot mic'd. I mean, we got hot mic'd a couple of times, but nothing too lethal. But anyway, well, Duncan knows, mate. He can spot him. So anyway, we were like, fucking, what do you say at the end of an event? It's meant to end with Simple lifting the trophy and confetti smashing into his face. He's finally done it. The great, the GOAT, the chosen one, as I started calling him, because he's got a 1 in his name, and he is the greatest player to play CS, and we were running with that over the course of the broadcast. You know, that was like, that's what should have happened. But it didn't. Instead we get, yo, Moon Angel, will you marry me? Like that fucking sad, tragic episode of like Tog the Bounty Hunter, where he's just fucking dealing with the death of Beth. Just nobody needs that at the end of an event. Nobody needs that. So where do I rate this major overall? Obviously, it's the most talked about major for me because it was the last one that I actually worked and will be the last one that I ever work. Listen, I'ma just say to B. I can't give it an A in good conscience. I think the broadcast was subpar. I think there were a ton of problems. I think there were some shit teams there, most notably that Walking Dead Evil Geniuses team. I think it's remembered as being absolutely sick, and of course it does have the viewer record because he's done it again. Every time I come out of retirement, I break a record, like 2.7 million. But, you know, I think we all got a bit caught up in the moment, a bit caught up in the hype. There were a ton of dead teams at this event. People obviously don't know. The Vitality deal had already been done, you know, blah, blah. So for me, G2 as well. Like, it was there was some deals that had already been done for after the major. So I don't know. So for me, it's B tier. It is B tier. I think if you go back and you watch it, you can't justify the broadcast. It's trash. Personal drama bleeding into the show. Not great games, for being honest about it. You know, we were excited because it was like we're back having live crowds because everyone had just given up on, the bullshit. And, yeah. And then, of course, at the event, they announce, man, we've got Antwerp. We're going back to back. We're going to be doing Antwerp. So, Antwerp 2022. I don't know. I mean, put it this way. PGL should never have been hired to do another major. This had to be an agreement before we even went into it. that they were going to do both. It's fucking wild to me that you would ever negotiate it that way. And so basically, I watched this one again, doing a no majors club. It was chill. I think I definitely fuck with the talent hiring for this broadcast. If you remember, I publicly tweeted and privately said, do not hide. I don't want to work this event. You've got Freya, but obviously it's in Antwerp, it's in Belgium. Shocks you go to. Shocks is your go-to. And so we ended up with that. PGL also didn't have any of the fucking ESL mafia bullshit. So Harry and Hugo get to work this event and have the cast of the event, the best cast at the event. Devil Walk as an analyst is in. I love Devil Walk. I've known him a long time. Known him, obviously as a player. Known him. He was my guy when I was creating my own player union. He was going to be my European representative. He was going to be the guy. I think I value him that highly as sort of a thinker and a person. But you got a while to go as an analyst. It's hard. The thing that people forget, and this is why I can't stand the Maui hate, and I couldn't stand the Thorin hate, and I couldn't stand the Anko hate. And it's just pathetic. The thing is, it's not just about what you say, and it's not just about how you say it. It's not just about the time in which you say it in. Somehow you've got to weave some sort of memorable point that doesn't tread on anyone else's fucking toes and do it in about 30 to 40 seconds with limited access to data. And you've got to do it in a way that's kind of like insightful, but also entertaining. It is a very complex art form to do an analysis, or what it should be called is punditry. What Mahone is doing is analysis. What Yanko used to do with the Weatherman segments is analysis. Really what we're doing is punditry. We're talking about things. We're talking about the game. We're telling anecdotes. We're drawing on our own experiences. And because we use the word analysis, and morons think analysis is he threw a flashbang and it went here and the flashbang made him blind. That's analysis is breaking down. Like, I think it's like literally from like the fucking Greek or something, but it means breaking down a part of something to like scrutinize it and look at it closer. And that can be anything. It doesn't just have to be fucking gameplay. And this idea that I don't fuck with the Mahone zone. I don't understand why he's credible when other people aren't. I don't understand how anyone can say Maui, who played at a decent level in NA, coached, commentated, he's done it, he can't be an analyst, but Mahone is a genius. I don't, because he worked as an analyst at NIP. I don't get it. Like, I don't understand how one is a more, like, if you give Maui that TV, he'll do the exact same content, if not better. So that's just real talk. But anyway, the problem we've got is what we're doing is punditry, and it's basically like we have to keep your attention so you don't fuck off from the broadcast, and we got to do it in an entertaining way. And so obviously, you need entertaining people on the desk. You need someone who's going to throw a grenade into the conversation, someone who's not afraid to express an unpopular opinion, someone who's not afraid to have some back and forth. I saw Duncan, he did a video recently about like the art of analysis, which is very good. Only thing I disagree is he says make sure you don't talk over each other. I call it a dynamic desk. When I run a desk, I want people to talk over each other. I want arguments, I want energy, I want back and forth. I want it so I can't get in. I don't want you to sit there like we're at school and wait for him to finish a point, then you make a point, then I say something, point me. I think that's boring. It's stagnant. I want like the Sky TV analysis desks. I want Roy Keane screaming in Gary Neville's face. That's what I want in esports. And so when I used to do the desks, I used to say that to people. I said, never be afraid to pipe up, even in the middle of a sentence. And, I think we got, like, some good desks that way. I think the E-League desks were good. I think the events that I worked in general were good. I think even when I was on the other side of the equation and I was an analyst, like the G-Finity's Angels, it was good. That's what I want, right? So, anyway, this event had, like, decent analysts, I'll say. Commentators, Machine and Sponge are obviously a duo now. Harry Hugo, great. Scrawny and Lorna's in there. Vince and Blair. It's S-tier. It's S-tier across the board. And you will notice, you don't need your old guards. You don't actually need them. I'll add that them snubbing Anders and Moses. Put it this way. After what happened at PGL, for whatever reason, PGL blamed Moses. And they said, we're never hiring him again. We're never going to work with him again. Which is just total bullshit. Because Jason didn't do anything. It wasn't him at all. Like, all he did was say, yeah, it kind of sucks. And then we did the rest, you know? But they basically said, like, you know, PGL don't want to work with Moses. So he was never in the running for this. The Anders one is kind of weird. I can't remember what happened. There was probably some reason. But, you know, I did make a point at the time. If you had to criticise this major, it's like, you know, a major without Anders doesn't feel like a major, like in some ways. Now, that being said, this was sick. And the new guys, like, you know, kind of came in and, you know, fucking did, like, a wicked job. You know, Banks as an interviewer, you know, I've said my piece multiple times. It's not S-tier interviewing for me. And overall, you know, we sat at home, we watched this broadcast. It's fresh in the memory. It was actually legit. The FaZe Clan Team Spirit series in the semi-finals, casted by Harry and Hugo, that is some immortal shit. That is so good. I remember listening to that cast in bed after a full day, streaming the No Majors Club, and listening to that cast and being blown away. It was fucking unreal energy. And, you know, unfortunately, we just didn't really get anything that kind of matched that in the playoffs. It was, you know, maybe the NIP series, I don't know. And then ultimately we get to the final. Na'Vi FaZe. Are Na'Vi going to go back to back? Or is, you know, our FaZe going to finally get their major? And honestly, I mean, you know, the first map, super close, but it's Inferno. It's Inferno in the save meta. So, you know, you're going to play all the rounds. But the nuke performance from Rain is just fucking standout. Just like Rain's god tier performance on nuke single-handedly wins FaZe the map and obviously secures them the major. It was the perfect antidote because all of the fucking, you know, he needs to go, put JKS in. It was brilliant. JKS had been a stand-in prior to that, obviously. And, you know, it's it's an okay final. Not god tier, not great, but, you know, notable for that. And a very, you know, a very good cast, actually, that is only eclipsed by Spirit FaZe Clan because of just how good that game was and how good Harry and Hugo sent it. So, I mean, look, Antwerp is a good major. It's an A-tier event. It's somewhere in the melange of A. It was very solid, very functionable. Right. The Rio Major. I mean, do we have to? Do we have to fucking relive this? I wrote an article called IEM Gaules Can Never Happen Again, or whatever it was, on Desert, or you should just go and watch it. I mean, where do we even begin? So, you look at the hiring here, this should have been remembered as a mega event. 4 desk hosts. I mean, one of them's Parler, whatever. But, you know, Shocks did interviewing out here. That's like a fucking boon and a half to get Shocks out for a week between like LCS commitments or whatever it was, and actually have her just contribute to the show. She loves going to Brazil. You know, she's been there many times. Knows a lot of Brazilian, you know, CS players and just esports people in general. And then the analysts are just ridiculous. There's like fucking so many: Yanko, Maniac, Maui Snake, Blair, Kassad, Mahone, Alan Hender, Peacemaker gets to do one. Hawker is there. It was just bonkers. There were just so many people, like, you know, and obviously there's a couple of pairings there I like better than others. But I mean, honestly, like, there's never been that many analysts hired in a major. You know, it's so much expertise, so many different styles. You should have been able to throw together some like insane combinations. I don't really think they pulled it off, but of course, remember, the event was just a horrifying nightmare for everyone who was watching at home. By the way, I talked to everyone who went to that event. For the talent on site, they remember it as some of their some of the best events that they've, if not the best event they've ever attended. The hotel was sick. Other than the Sadikist drama, other than Frisbee Gate, there was like no dramas. It was weird because the elections were happening. Everyone thought maybe the fucking Bolsonaro voters were going to rise up when Lula won and fucking take over. And that was right next to, like, you know, it's in a big city, you know, blah, blah. So all of that, there were general worries about some of the threats that have been made to come to Brazil stuff. So at the end of the day, this could have gone much, much worse. This could have been like a major that just ends in flames, like smoldering, riots outside. Like, yeah. It could have been that, but it wasn't that. But it's got to be said, and I don't need to belabor the point. This was shit games across the board with shit outsiders playing shit CS. Winning a major. Put it this way, if Immortals is a fluke, I don't know what this is. Everybody bad. People, like, the CS is abysmal at this tournament. And this is obviously, when I was saying, yeah, the CS, these partnered leagues are killing CS, Or G2 were meant to be like some sort of dominant force, just weren't even here. Didn't even qualify, I don't think. Was this the one they didn't qualify for? This was Get Out of My Major, wasn't it? Yeah, this one. So just awful, just like fucking dreadful. Like the teams, like again, like everybody was trying to hype up Imperial. I even put them in my pick'ems. Not that pick'ems should count for shit. If they think they do, you're a moron. But like, I was like, the teams that lost, like FaZe going 0-3, Nip going 0-3, Liquid out, Vitality out. But don't worry, guys, you've got Mouse, you've got outsiders. I want to be sick. Playoffs were like just appalling. This was, of course, a different team spirit. They made some roster moves. Heroic beat them. Heroic have that, Heroic Furia is probably all that's worth talking about. The Mouse Sports series was basically 2 bad maps and a close one. The Furia Na'Vi remains some of the most disgraceful shit I've ever seen at an event. I can't believe that any true fan of CS would want to spit at Simple. Simple's, not a perfect human being. Simple said some crazy shit, done some crazy shit. He's the greatest player to ever touch our game, and it's like, I can't believe anybody would want to do that. I can't believe ESL would misspell his name the day after. Right? First of all, imagine how it goes if just before the Furia Na'Vi game, that's when you announce Simple is the greatest of all, the greatest player of the decade with ESL. And you haven't come out and it's a stand innovation from Furia. Do you think, by the way, that might have actually quelled down some of the fucking hostility by reminding everybody of his fucking inherent greatness? No, of course not. We're not going to do that. We're ESL. We don't fucking know what we're doing. We're bouncing off the fucking walls, just waiting for the Saudi money to come in. And so you have like fucking this, and we've just got to fucking fillet Gowles and let him do everything. Gowles is running the show, choosing the fucking casters, giving speeches outside, just doing all, saying you will never understand, riling up Discord. Yeah, it was ridiculous, like absolute ridiculous. So anyway, instead, Simple gets to be named Player of the Decade in a room with like 50 people in it, and his name fucking spelled wrong in the background, like an absolute shame. It's shameful, really shameful, and it just shows you don't respect the game when you allow stuff like that to happen. That would not happen on my watch, and if it did, there'd be fucking heads would be rolling. It's like, it's either important or it ain't. It either matters or it doesn't. And so anyway, look, the playoffs were just like trash. The games were trash. The event was trash. Gowles ruined this fucking event from start to finish, and ESL let him. And this should have been, I know it's a fond memory for all the people who work there. And Harry and Hugo probably got the cast of the event again. Oh yeah, crowd cheating. After being told, come to Brazil, we'll show you how to do it. No, you'll show us how to do it when Brazil teams played. And all the other stuff and all the excuses. And, think about what we just had in Paris. Say what you will about Parisians, they are rude motherfuckers by and large. But the fans in Paris showed Brazil up. They really did. They applauded all of the games. They give standing ovations to teams as they lost. They give Cadian, big ups. It was embarrassing. It's embarrassing that you can't get behind the game. Like, put it this way, at a World Cup, you might see 2 countries you're not invested in playing, but you still cheer for the action. I'm not saying you can't cheer more for the home team. Saying that is stupid. Saying being biased to the home team, obviously that's an expectation. But if you're not going to cheer for all the teams on some degree, if you're not going to enjoy a full day of Counter-Strike, stay at home. Don't buy a ticket. Watch your game at home. Simple as that. That's what you should do. Because the way we do things in esports is you get a full day of action with your ticket. You get more value. You don't just get one game. You get multiple games. If you ain't got the energy or the desire to even be in the room for the second one, don't come. There are people who will. There are people who love the game, love the atmosphere, love being part of esports. We don't have to be like sports. We never had to be like sports. Our broadcasts should be like sports broadcasts. Our events, our formats, they don't have to be like sports. They don't have to be. We're our own thing, and people still keep fucking this up. And Brazil was just, the Reddit excuses, again, you can go watch my video of that. The fucking come to Brazil. Like, what an embarrassment. What an embarrassment for your fan base. What an absolute embarrassment. Shameful. Even with all the teams pandering to them, please don't attack us, please don't spit on us, and holding up like Brazil-style jerseys they've made, going outside, selling their merch. Haha, yeah, Gowles is amazing. Yeah, let's all have a dance. Like doing all that shit. Pathetic and not even rewarded. Mouse Sports were wearing Brazil fucking colours, and instead a chant for Furia who weren't even playing starts. Garbage. Absolute garbage. So there's no justifying any of that. There was no justifying the overall quality. There were a ton of other problems. The Gowles stuff is unforgivable. For me, it's just D tier. I don't give a shit. I said it all anyway. I've said it all a million times. That's a D tier event. Even though everyone who was there said it was S tier. Right? It was S tier to be there. It was not fucking S tier to watch. And then that leaves us with Paris, the most recent major. I've got to say, I was really disappointed with this major. I thought it was very lackluster. First of all, just to make it complete, for the finality of the record, the hiring around this is nonsense. I did a whole video on this, so you can just go watch it. Jake Lucky should never be anywhere near CSGO. I don't care how many Twitter followers he has. He is an enemy of CSGO and the people who have helped build it. He was a parasite when he was a news entity, and he got multiple stories wrong, and he's never corrected the way he behaves in regards to being a news person. And to use him because he's popular is a disgrace, and it's an insult to the major and the prestige of being hired to work one, especially because the concept of doing interviews with overtime, in a irreverent, light-hearted environment, there are people that would absolutely knock that out the park. By the way, including people you've already worked with, like Launders, who do content for your show, it doesn't have to be, somewhat an influencer. There are people who would do it. There are people who would do it for free and do it better. So that's a disgrace. I'll also just add, I am sick of the stranglehold in the reporting podcasting space in CS. I hate the way it's gone. I hate that we're now seeing Chad has this podcast over here, and Chad has this podcast over here, and that's the HLT TV podcast, and HLTV go to ESL events and sell tickets for a live version of Confirmed, and they're doing it at Blast, and now Professor's getting hired at Blast, and now we got Talking Counter, and don't worry, that's different, but ESL have put out a press release saying that they negotiated the deal or something. I don't know, man. I don't know where you go now to get opinions that don't go back in some capacity to getting the bag or promoting events were better than they were, or not talking about any of the bad stuff. I don't know where that exists. I'll also drop some fucking knowledge on you now. Me and Duncan, because he ended by the numbers with Semler, they fulfilled that run they were meant to do. Me and Duncan did talk about bringing it back, but I don't know if I can. I don't think I'm mentally in the right place to deal with that level of vitriolic hatred that doing by the numbers brought. It was really bad for my mental. I was getting very, very depressed, and the stress of the whole of doing that show and having all the nutcases turn up, and some of them, they're not just a nutcase. Some of the nutcases are fucking influencers themselves, and just dealing with that and I just don't want to do it. I just don't want to do it anymore. I just don't want to do it. I said yes, and then I said no, and I fucked Duncan over in that sense, because I think he announced, we were going to do a big funny reveal, it's the last Revenge of By the Numbers, and then I was going to do, we were going to do Bride of By the Numbers was my working title for it. We were going to get, an animated Frankenstein sitting up on a fucking thing for the titles. But I can't do it, man. I just don't want to do it. I really don't. I think I'll end up wanting to kill myself if I start doing that again. I really think it'll be not good. And so, it's just too emotionally fucking draining. And I think about the quality of life I have now and just how there's less stress in it because I'm not doing a fucking CS podcast and not having to deal with the CS fan base and CS morons and fucked up delusional obsessives that are just harassing you every day. It's like, you know what? Yeah, actually, I deserve not to have that in my life. I don't deserve to have that in my life. I really don't. So we were going to do it because we were like, there's definitely a need, rather, for an irreverent, authentic CS podcast that can criticize things that some of these others can't. Because, look, you can't tell me Professor is hired as an analyst because he's like a really good analyst. You can't tell me Professor is hired. I've got nothing against Professor, by the way. Like, I want to make it abundantly clear. He's like, I don't talk to Striker. I talk to Professor. I think he's done fantastic work at HLTV. I like the guy, right? I respect the guy. But as a broadcast talent, to get to a major, you have got to fucking earn it. You cannot just be there because your website is big in CS. And I can't see any other argument for having him there. He's not a charismatic presence. He does like a turtleneck, I suppose. But, at the end of the day, he shouldn't have been hired. And he's getting hired because we all want, HLTV in the good books, and they promote our events, and they do coverage for our events, and they come and do confirmed and sell tickets at our events, and it's a value add because we can say, if you come to our event, you can watch an episode of HLTV confirmed, and Sponge is working the events, and Sponge is doing the podcast, and it's a tangled web, and I don't really like it. So I hope someone comes along and does something like By the Numbers or just any other podcast because, at the end of the day, it's necessary. So anyway, I didn't really like the hires here. I mean, like Maniac and Maui and Pimp, fine. Mahone, Professor, yeah. And then, obviously as well, they fucked up because they had that, what was he called? Massive, or whatever his name was. Massive was remember whenever I pointed him out in the video because he said the super embarrassing thing, have a nice day, at the end of an interview when the guy had already fucking, when Apex had lost, or no, it wasn't Apex, it was Snappy, he said to Snappy, he was like, have a nice day, and like Snappy was like devastated, so, and then, of course, nobody criticised that though. But yeah, I mean, look, not the worst major. I love it because obviously G2, didn't put it this way, right? The fact that there's all these underdog teams in the playoffs are like pretty bad. Like, there's just no getting around it. There's no getting around the myth that those teams were going to be the new tier 1 was just ridiculous. And seeing like Gamer Legion in the final of a major, it's not a great major. We all wanted Heroic Vitality, but Heroic are perennial chokers. You can't really do anything about that. Heroic losing the last map of the semi-final, like getting blown out on Mirage 16-6 by Gamer Legion, is some shameful shit. And maybe the whole event could have been fucking salvaged. But, again, look, here's the quarterfinals. Heroic and FaZe Clan. FaZe had limped into this. Gamer Legion Monty, I mean, who gives a fuck? Liquid Apex, Team Liquid just doing liquid things. And then into the Breach Vitality, and obviously Vitality, home crowd, and peaking at the right time. So it's one of the worst. It is probably the worst top 8 at a major. And the games weren't terrible. They weren't as bad as some others. But ultimately, it's embarrassing to win a major if you're Vitality, and then you go, well, who did you beat? And you go, 3 teams outside of the top 20. All right, sound sick major, I guess. So, I mean, all the people on Reddit who were saying, oh, no, just the scene's so strong right now. It's not. It's partnered leagues and playing with stand-ins and people having kids because they're getting too old to be playing video games the way we used to in fucking, back when it was you had to be hardcore to be an esports star. And I'm not saying it's healthy, by the way. It's good that players can take breaks and have families and do all this other stuff. But when you're not doing that, you're dialed in, you are producing better counterstrike, right? That's just the reality of it. So, I mean, the bottom line is it's a trash era in CS. 2023 has been diabolically poor for the standard. Now people have one eye on CS2. No one's really trying. I mean, we've been watching the Blast games as they sort of panned out today, and it's just low stakes, bad counterstrike, isn't it? With new lineups, brilliant, having lots of fun. So, ultimately, I don't think Paris is a D. Shit trophy. Oh, and I didn't even talk about it as well. I mean, the way Blast mugged off Harry and Hugo, I know I talked about it on the No Majors Club at the time, bringing them in to then not put them in a stadium, not even give them the UK game, but have them still there, sat around at the event and not sending them home is it's pathetic. It really is sending the clowns. It's an absolute fucking joke what they did. Especially when, as I said, last two majors prior to this, Harry and Hugo have had the best casts. All due respect to everyone else, but I think most people would agree objectively unless you were playing favourites. They did bring Anders back, so that's good. And Anders and Moses did a good job. Scrawny and Launders are fucking lights out. They're so good. And it's at the end of the day, and they gave a chance to, Tech Girl do a major, which, ordinarily, you might say she hasn't paid her dues, but she certainly has. She's done she's done more CS events. I saw people saying she hasn't even done a CS event. It's she's done tons. They're just not the type of CS event you watch. She's been there in the trenches. So, I mean, look, overall, I think it's a C tier. I can't give it a D tier. And that's my tier list and my experiences through the major. I didn't get invited. Blast will never work with me for a variety of reasons. I've criticised Blast, going right back to Nicola Nyholm. I made myself an enemy of Blast back when I was pointing out about the Blast Australis. I criticised them when they were doing that fucking Neon deal. I've been on Blast shit since day one. And unfortunately, they would never hire me for an event, even if I was available for the work. In fact, want to say, I don't think Blast have ever invited me to anything. I don't think Blast have ever asked me to do an event. Not this iteration. So, I mean, whatever. But to be fair, that major was a real letdown, especially given how well known Blast are, fucking considered for the production and all of that other stuff. So I think they shit the bed. The trophy's an embarrassment. The worst thing I've ever seen given to players. It looks like something off Nickelodeon. It's a joke. And yeah, I mean, overall, I think you can see just by the dates and times, you can see when CS was good, right? Because even if you disagree with one or two on this list, I think in general, by and large, it's fair. Most people would agree with most of the placements. But it's really sad you see, all these later events down here. Antwerp's been the best of a bad bunch certainly since we come back from COVID. So yeah, that's it. Those are my thoughts. I've done it all.